The bathroom door slammed with the finality of a coffin lid. In the harsh fluorescent glare, Director Vincent Crane's fingers dug into the sleeve of Maya Chen's scrubs like talons into prey. She didn't scream, couldn't scream, as her back hit the cold tile wall. His breath was hot against her face, reeking of coffee and entitlement. "You're going to forget what you saw in my office," he hissed, blocking the exit with his bulk. "Understand?" Maya's heart thundered, but her body went eerily still, a survival instinct learned in another life. Through the crack beneath the door, a shadow moved. 4 paws, 90 pounds of trained lethality, and eyes that recognized a threat the moment they locked onto Vincent Crane's silhouette. The director thought fear would keep her silent. He was about to learn that some things you can't intimidate, especially not a war dog who remembers the woman who saved his life. Before we dive into this story, please subscribe and follow along to see how it unfolds. Like this video and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Maya Chen had survived 3 tours in places whose names still appeared in classified reports. She'd performed field surgery under mortar fire, stabilized casualties in burning vehicles, and once spent 14 hours in a collapsed bunker keeping 2 Marines alive with nothing but a camelback and her bare hands. Civilian life was supposed to be the easy part. Ridgewood Memorial Hospital in Baxter Springs didn't look like a war zone. Its gleaming towers rose above the suburban sprawl like monuments to healing and hope. The employee handbook promised a supportive environment. The recruitment video featured smiling nurses and grateful families. Nobody mentioned that some predators wore white coats instead of fatigues. Her first month was textbook orientation. Learn the charting system, memorize medication protocols, shadow senior staff. Maya kept her head down and her military background quiet. At 32, she was older than most first-year nurses, and the questions always followed, why nursing? Why now? Why here? She'd learned to deflect with pleasant vagueness. The truth, that she was trying to atone for the lives she couldn't save, wasn't suitable for break room small talk. The problems started small. A misplaced supply order blamed on her. A patient complaint she never received. Schedule changes that left her working 3 consecutive night shifts. Maya weathered it the way she'd weathered sandstorms and insurgent fire, by becoming invisible, efficient, indispensable. Vincent Crane noticed anyway. He was 54, silver-haired, with the kind of practiced warmth that photographed well for hospital newsletters. As director of operations, he controlled schedules, assignments, and the subtle machinery of workplace politics. His office occupied the entire northeast corner of the administrative floor, all glass and leather and carefully curated achievement. Maya's first real interaction with him came during a code blue on the cardiac floor. She'd been rotating through units, learning the layout, when alarms shrieked through the 3rd floor hallway. Years of training kicked in before conscious thought. She was in the room, starting compressions, calling for equipment while seasoned nurses were still processing the emergency. The patient, a 78-year-old woman recovering from valve replacement, survived. The attending physician praised Maya's quick thinking in his incident report. The family sent flowers. And Vincent Crane appeared at the nurses' station the next morning with coffee and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Impressive response yesterday," he said, setting the cup beside her charting tablet. "Marine Corps, wasn't it?" Maya's fingers stilled on the keyboard. She'd left that detail off her resume. "Army," she lied smoothly. "Long time ago." His gaze traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well, we're lucky to have you. Someone with your skills." The coffee sat untouched until it went cold. After that, he found reasons to appear. In the cafeteria, outside the locker room. Once in the parking garage at shift change, his BMW idling too close to her decade-old Civic. Each encounter was technically innocent. Each left her calculating exit routes. The other nurses noticed. "Crane's got his eye on you," whispered Deanna Park, a 10-year veteran with knowing eyes. They were restocking a supply closet 3 weeks into Maya's tenure. "Be careful. I can handle myself." That's what Simmons thought. Deanna's voice dropped. She filed a complaint last year, claimed he cornered her during a night shift, made inappropriate comments. HR investigated for 2 weeks, found insufficient evidence, and she was transferred to the clinic in Millerville. 40-minute commute each way. She quit within a month. Maya's hands tightened on a box of gauze. And he's still here. He's always here. Brings in donations from wealthy families, keeps the board happy, knows where all the bodies are buried. Deanna glanced toward the hallway. Just don't be alone with him. Good advice. Impossible to follow in a hospital that operated 24/7, where empty hallways and isolated rooms were part of the architecture. The real trouble began on a rainy Thursday in early October. Maya was charting in the staff office on the 4th floor, a cramped room with outdated computers and walls thin enough to hear conversations from the hallway. Most nurses avoided it, preferring the open stations, but Maya liked the solitude. Quiet space to think, room to breathe. She was reviewing lab results when raised voices filtered through the wall. Vincent Crane's office was adjacent, separated by drywall and institutional paint, usually soundproof enough, but when people yelled, the building's secrets spilled through. You can't keep burying these numbers. A woman's voice sharp with frustration. Maya recognized it. Dr. Patricia Reeves, chief of surgery. The board needs to see the real infection rates. The board needs to see progress. Crane's response was cold, controlled, which is what the adjusted figures show. Adjusted? Vincent, these are falsified reports. Patients are developing post-surgical infections at twice the national average, and you're hiding it by ensuring this hospital maintains its accreditation and funding. Do you know what happens if the state pulls our trauma certification? We lose 40% of our emergency revenue. Staff cuts, department closures, your surgical program included. A long pause. Then Reeves, quieter but seething. This is fraud. This is management. Something you'd understand if you spent less time grandstanding and more time remembering who signs your contract renewals. Maya's fingers had frozen on the keyboard. Through the wall, she heard papers shuffling, a door opening. Reeves stormed past the staff office without seeing Maya hunched over her screen. She should have left it alone. Should have finished her charting and clocked out. Should have remembered Deanna's warning about bodies and burial grounds. Instead, she sat in the humming silence, thinking about the elderly woman she'd resuscitated 3 weeks ago. About the post-op patients she'd monitored, some of whom had developed fevers and complications the attending physicians had attributed to normal recovery challenges. About the young mother in 412B who'd gone septic 2 days after a routine gallbladder removal. Adjusted figures. Falsified reports. Maya had seen corruption before, in contractors who billed for body armor that never arrived, in officers who traded fuel allotments for cash. She'd stayed quiet then too, telling herself that wasn't her fight, that she was there to patch wounds and keep people breathing. Different war, same calculation. She was logging out when the office door opened without a knock. Vincent Crane filled the doorframe, his suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened. The calculated warmth was gone from his face. "How long have you been here?" he asked. Maya kept her voice level. "Just finishing charts. About to head out." His eyes went to her computer screen, already dark, to the empty notepad beside her keyboard, to the wall separating this room from his office. "Did you need something? You could have come to my office." "No, sir. Just catching up on documentation." He stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click. The room shrank. "Maya, right? Maya Chen. You've been doing excellent work. Really impressive, especially for someone so new. Thank you." That code blue last month, textbook response. "And I've heard good things from the attending physicians. You have a real future here." He moved closer, leaning against the desk beside her chair. Too close. Deliberately close. "I like to keep an eye on our rising stars, make sure they're supported." Every muscle in Maya's body coiled tight. She recognized this dance, the isolation, the friendly pretense, the unspoken threat wrapped in compliments. "I appreciate that," she said, standing smoothly, putting the chair between them. "But I should get going. Early shift tomorrow." His hand shot out, fingers closing around her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to stop her. "I wasn't finished." For 3 seconds, Maya considered her options. A sharp strike to his throat. Leverage his weight, use the desk for momentum. She could have him on the ground before he processed the pain. But this wasn't Helmand Province. This was Baxter Springs, And assault charges didn't care about self-defense when the victim was a hospital director and you were a nobody with a questionable employment gap. "Let go," she said quietly. His grip tightened. "You seem tense. I'm just trying to be friendly. Unless there's a reason you're so nervous around me." "I'm not nervous." "No?" His thumb traced across her pulse point. "Your heart's racing." "Because you're touching me without permission. Let go." He released her wrist but didn't step back. "You know, I could make things very easy for you here. Better shifts, preferred assignments, or..." He let the word hang. "Things could get difficult. Mistakes happen. Complaints get filed. Performance reviews can go either way." Maya's jaw clenched. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. You're smart enough to understand how things work." He straightened his tie, smoothing the fabric. "Think about what kind of experience you want to have at Ridgewood. We'll talk again soon." He left the door open when he exited. A power play. A reminder that he could invade her space whenever he chose. Maya sat in the empty office for 10 minutes, forcing her breathing to slow, her hands to stop shaking. Not from fear, from rage. The particular fury of being prey when you'd spent years as a predator. She thought about reporting him. Imagined walking into HR, filing a formal complaint. Pictured the investigator's skeptical face as they asked what exactly had happened. "He grabbed your wrist? Said you had a future? Made you uncomfortable? Do you have witnesses? Evidence? Anything besides your word against a man who'd been with the hospital for 15 years? Simmons had tried. Simmons had lost. Maya logged back into her computer and did something stupid. She accessed the hospital's shared drive, navigating through folders until she found the administrative reports. Infection statistics, surgical outcomes, quality metrics submitted to state regulators. She didn't have authorization for these files, didn't have time to cover her digital tracks properly. But she took screenshots anyway, fingers flying across the keyboard, documenting everything Crane had altered. The real numbers versus the reported numbers. A pattern of systematic fraud stretching back 18 months. She saved the files to an encrypted thumb drive she kept in her bag, an old habit from handling classified medical records overseas. If Crane came after her, if he tried to bury her the way he'd buried Simmons, she wanted ammunition. Insurance. That's all it was. She made it 3 days. On Sunday, Maya was assigned to the weekend skeleton crew on the second floor, orthopedics and recovery, usually quiet. She was checking vitals on a hip replacement patient when her supervisor appeared, face carefully neutral. "Maya, can you come with me? Director Crane wants to see you." Her stomach dropped. "Now? I'm mid-rounds." "Simmons can cover." It sounded important. The walk to the administrative floor felt like a perp walk. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Had he discovered the file access? Fabricated a complaint? Or was this just another power play? Another reminder that he owned her schedule, her time, her entire professional existence? Crane's office door was closed. His assistant, a brittle woman named Margaret, who'd worked for him for a decade, waved Maya through without looking up. "He's expecting you." The office was empty. Maya stood in the doorway, every instinct screaming. This was a setup, a test, another violation of boundaries designed to see how she'd react. She should leave, walk out, let him play whatever game this was alone. But she was tired of calculating exits and swallowing rage, tired of men who wielded power like weapons and counted on silence to keep their secrets. She stepped inside, leaving the door open. Scanned the room for cameras. There were 3. She'd clocked them weeks ago during a mandatory safety meeting held in this office. Positioned herself where at least 2 would have clear sightlines. Vincent Crane emerged from the private bathroom attached to his office, rolling down his sleeves. He smiled when he saw her. "Maya, thank you for coming up. Your assistant said it was important." "Close the door, would you?" "I'm fine with it open." His smile thinned. "I said close the door." Maya held his gaze. "And I said no." For a moment, something ugly flashed across his face. Then the professional mask slammed back into place. "Fine. Suit yourself." He moved to his desk, leaning against it with studied casualness. "I wanted to talk about your file access on Thursday night." There it was. I was reviewing infection protocols, Maya said evenly, part of my continuing education requirements. From the administrative folder, the one that requires director-level authorization? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, turned it toward her. A log of her file access, time-stamped and detailed. You were in those folders for 17 minutes. Downloaded multiple files. Care to explain? Maya's mind raced. Deny everything? Claim confusion about permissions? Or call his bluff and see if he was really willing to escalate over files that proved his fraud? I was curious about the hospital's performance metrics, she said. Wanted to understand our quality standards. By stealing confidential reports? By reviewing data that affects patient care? If you're concerned about unauthorized access, maybe you should be more concerned about unauthorized alterations to that data. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Crane's casual posture evaporated. He straightened, shoulders squaring, and for the first time Maya saw the predator drop all pretense of civility. You have no idea what you're playing with, he said softly. I know falsifying state reports is a felony. You know nothing. You're a first-year nurse with a spotty employment history and a military discharge I'm guessing wasn't exactly honorable. He stepped toward her. You think you can threaten me? I've buried better people than you. Then you'll have no problem with me sharing those files with the state medical board. She knew immediately she'd made a mistake, not in the threat itself, but in revealing she still had the files, that they weren't just accessed and forgotten, but saved, weaponized. Crane's face went very still. When he moved, it was fast, faster than she expected for a man in his 50s. His hand locked around her upper arm, yanking her away from the door, away from the camera's sightlines. You smug little bitch, he hissed. You're going to delete those files, right now, or I will make your life a living hell. Maya's training took over. She twisted, breaking his grip, putting distance between them. But he was already moving, blocking her path to the door, his bulk and position giving him advantage in the confined space. Move, she said, not until we settle this. Last chance. Get out of my way. He laughed, actually laughed. Or what? You'll hit me? Please, try it. Give me one reason to have you arrested for assault. Maya was calculating angles, weighing options, when Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Crane, Dr. Reeves is here for your 2 o'clock. He didn't take his eyes off Maya. Tell her I'm running late. She says it's urgent. I said I'm busy. The door opened. Patricia Reeves stood there in surgical scrubs, her reading glasses perched on her head, irritation radiating from every pore. She took in the scene, Crane blocking Maya's exit, both of them tense and coiled, and her expression hardened. Am I interrupting something? Crane smoothly pivoted, his voice turning honey warm. Just a performance discussion with Miss Chen. We were wrapping up. Reeves looked at Maya. Are you all right? Every instinct told her to say yes, to minimize, to escape and survive and fight another day. But Maya met the surgeon's eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Recognition. The kind that comes from understanding exactly what it means to be cornered by a man who thinks his position makes him untouchable. No, Maya said. I'm not. Crane's jaw tightened. Dr. Reeves, this is a personnel matter. That you're conducting behind a closed door with a subordinate who clearly doesn't want to be here? Reeves stepped fully into the office. Maya, you're free to go. Vincent and I need to discuss those quality metrics anyway. The real ones. Maya didn't wait for permission. She moved past Reeves, past Crane's murderous glare, out into the hallway where Margaret was suddenly very busy reorganizing her desk. She made it to the stairwell before her hands started shaking. Made it to the locker room before the adrenaline crash hit. She sat on the wooden bench between rows of lockers, breathing through her nose, counting to 4, holding, releasing. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Think very carefully about your next move. You're replaceable. Maya deleted it, then pulled out her personal laptop and uploaded the encrypted files to 3 separate cloud storage accounts. Sent copies to her personal email. Printed hard copies on the public printer in the hospital library and sealed them in an envelope she'd mailed to herself for the postmark. If Crane wanted a war, she'd give him one, but she'd make damn sure she had ammunition first. She was scheduled for a night shift that Tuesday. When she arrived at 6 p.m., her badge wouldn't scan at the entrance. The security guard, a kind older man named Thomas, who usually waved her through, looked uncomfortable as he checked his computer. Says here your access has been suspended pending review. Review of what? Doesn't say. You'll need to talk to HR in the morning. Maya stood in the lobby, watching colleagues flow past her into the building, and felt the trap closing. This was how it worked. Suspension without explanation. Enough time for Crane to build a case, fabricate complaints, poison the well with whispers about her instability or unprofessionalism. She should have seen it coming, should have known that threatening a man like Crane would never end in her favor. Instead, she drove home to her one-bedroom apartment and spent the night documenting everything. Times, dates, conversations, the wrist grab, the blocked door, the veiled threats. She wrote it all down in clinical detail, the way she'd written casualty reports in the field, dispassionate, factual, damning. At 8 a.m., she called the state medical board's fraud hotline and left a message. Then she called 3 local news stations and 2 investigative journalists whose work she'd followed. Most went to voicemail. One reporter called back within an hour. Maya Chen, this is Derek Townsend with KBA X News. You left a message about Ridgewood Memorial? They're falsifying infection statistics. I have documentation. A pause. That's a serious allegation. Can you prove it? I can prove the director altered state reports. I can prove he threatened me when I discovered it. Whether that's enough for a story is up to you. Send me what you have. If it checks out, we'll talk. Maya hung up and sent the files before she could second-guess herself. Then she waited. HR called at 10:30. A brusque woman named Sandra informed her that due to concerns about professional conduct and unauthorized access to confidential materials, her employment was being terminated effective immediately. She could pick up her final paycheck in 2 weeks. Her benefits would continue through the end of the month. Security would escort her if she needed to collect personal items from her locker. What conduct concerns? Maya asked. I'm entitled to see any complaints filed against me. The director felt your behavior during your last meeting was aggressive and unprofessional. That, combined with the data breach, it wasn't a breach. And what behavior? He physically blocked me from leaving his office. That's not how it was reported. Look, Ms. Chen, I'm sure this is frustrating, but the decision is final. You're welcome to appeal through the proper channels, but I'd advise you to move on. These things rarely end well for anyone. Translation: don't fight, don't make noise. Disappear quietly, and maybe we won't destroy your references or blackball you from every hospital in the region. Maya had heard that advice before, from officers who suggested she not report supply theft, from senior enlisted who implied that her rape kit after the assault in Kandahar would only complicate her career. The cost of being believed had always been higher than the price of silence. But this time, she had something those other times had lacked: evidence, documentation. A paper trail that existed outside Crane's control. She picked up her few belongings that afternoon with a security guard trailing her like she might steal bedpans. Deanna Park caught her in the hallway, slipping her a folded piece of paper. My personal number, if you need a reference or just want to talk. She lowered her voice. Half the staff knows what he did. We're just not brave enough to say it out loud. Maya pocketed the note without responding. Bravery was a luxury. Survival was a choice. She was loading her car in the employee lot when she noticed him. Vincent Crane, standing by the administrative entrance, arms crossed, watching her pack, making sure she left, making sure she knew he'd won. Maya locked her car and walked straight toward him. Stay away from me, he said when she was 10 feet out. She stopped. You think this is over? I think you're unemployed and about to become unemployable. Whatever fantasies you have about exposing me, let them go. I've been doing this for 15 years. You're not even a footnote. We'll see. His smile was all teeth. Yes, we will. Good luck with your next interview when they ask why you left Ridgewood after only 5 weeks. What will you tell them? That you stole confidential files and accused your supervisor of fraud because he hurt your feelings? Maya had been in rooms with men who'd killed for sport. She'd stared down insurgents high on cat and bravado. Vincent Crane, for all his institutional power, was just another bully who'd never faced consequences. I'll tell them the truth, she said. Let's see which one of us they believe. She drove away without looking back, watching him shrink in her rearview mirror until he was just another figure in a parking lot, diminished and distant. She knew, intellectually, that the fight wasn't over, that Crane had resources and connections, that the news story might not run, that the state board might do nothing. She knew the house always won when the game was rigged. But Maya had learned something in 3 tours and a dozen firefights. Sometimes you didn't win by surviving. Sometimes you won just by refusing to die quietly. She made it home before the shaking started again. Made it inside before the tears came. Not from sadness, but from pure incandescent rage at every man who'd ever assumed her silence was guaranteed, at every system that protected predators and punished prey for fighting back. Her phone rang at 6 p.m. Derek Townsend, the reporter. I showed your files to our investigative team. This is significant. We need to verify the alterations, run it past legal, but if this holds up, we've got a story. Are you willing to go on record? Do you have other sources? Because if I'm the only one, we're reaching out to former employees, and I've got a call into the state medical board. Someone there flagged that you'd already filed a complaint this morning. Maya closed her eyes. How long until you run it? Depends on what else we find. 2 weeks, maybe 3? Can you hold out that long? She thought about her bank account, enough for maybe 6 weeks of rent and food if she stretched. About the job market for nurses with terminated for cause on their record. About Vincent Crane's promise to make her unemployable. I'll manage, she said. After hanging up, Maya did what she always did when walls closed in. She went for a run. 5 miles through her neighborhood, pushing until her lungs burned and her thoughts quieted. Physical pain she could handle. Physical exhaustion had clear remedies. She was 2 miles in when she noticed the black SUV pacing her 3 blocks back. Same vehicle that had been parked across from her apartment when she got home. Could be coincidence, could be paranoia, could be Crane making sure she knew he could reach her anywhere. Maya altered her route, cutting through a park, circling back on herself. The SUV didn't follow, but the message was sent. No place was safe, no distance far enough. She showered, ate canned soup, and tried to sleep. Failed. Spent the night scrolling through job listings in other cities, calculating how far she'd need to run to escape Crane's reach. Portland, maybe. Or Denver. Somewhere big enough to disappear. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with an email from an encrypted address. No subject line, just a single attachment, a photo of her apartment building taken from street level. The lights in her unit clearly visible, the timestamp from 2 hours ago. Maya deleted it, but the damage was done. He wanted her scared, isolated, desperate enough to back down. She opened her laptop and sent Derek Townsend every additional detail she could remember, every conversation, every threat, documented with military precision. Then she sent copies to 2 lawyers who specialized in employment law, along with a message. If something happens to me, this is why. Sleep finally came around dawn, shallow and fractured, full of dreams where she ran through hospital corridors that twisted like labyrinths, where doors locked behind her, and Vincent Crane's voice echoed from speakers she couldn't locate. You're replaceable. You're nothing. You'll never be believed. She woke to pounding on her door. Disoriented, reaching for a sidearm she hadn't carried in years, Maya stumbled from bed as the knocking intensified. Miss Chen, police, open the door! Her blood turned to ice. She threw on clothes, checked the peephole. 2 uniformed officers, one with his hand resting on his belt, the other holding what looked like paperwork. She opened the door to the chain lock's limit. Can I help you? The older officer, gray-haired, weary-eyed, consulted his papers. Are you Maya Chen, formerly employed at Ridgewood Memorial Hospital? Yes. We need you to come down to the station. There's been a complaint filed against you for harassment and cyberstalking. We'd like to get your statement. Of course. Of course Crane would weaponize the system itself. Turn her into the aggressor. Make her the threat. I haven't stalked anyone, Maya said. That's fine. We just need your statement. You're not under arrest, but we'd appreciate your cooperation. She knew how this worked. Knew that voluntary cooperation could become failure to comply in a heartbeat. Knew that anything she said would be used to build whatever narrative Crane had already constructed. I want a lawyer present. The officer's expression didn't change. That's your right. But just so you're aware, the complaint includes screenshots of emails sent to Mr. Crane's work address containing threats of professional retaliation and defamation. Are you saying you didn't send those? I sent documentation of his fraud to journalists and regulatory agencies. If he's characterizing that as threats, ma'am, we really need to do this at the station. Are you going to come voluntarily or do we need to escalate this? Maya's hands clenched. Every instinct screamed to fight, to argue, to make them articulate exactly what law she'd broken. But she'd seen too many situations spiral because someone couldn't read the room, couldn't calculate the cost of resistance versus compliance. I'll come voluntarily. Let me get my shoes. They didn't handcuff her. Small mercy. But the drive to the station in the back of a patrol car, the processing, the sterile interview room with its cameras and one-way mirror, all of it was designed to intimidate. To remind her she was small and powerless and one wrong word away from real consequences. The detective who interviewed her was younger than the officers, sharper, with eyes that evaluated every micro-expression. He laid out printed emails on the table between them, Maya's correspondence with the medical board, with journalists, with lawyers. All of it presented as evidence of harassment. Mr. Crane says you've been fixated on him since he gave you negative performance feedback, that you became increasingly erratic, stole confidential files, and when terminated for cause, began a campaign of defamation designed to damage his reputation and career. Maya stared at the emails, her words, her evidence, reframed as weapons of obsession. That's not what happened. Then tell me what did happen. She did. Calmly, factually, walking him through the timeline. The overheard conversation, the file access, Crane's threats and physical intimidation, the coordinated retaliation that ended with her termination, and now this, a police interrogation designed to criminalize her attempt at accountability. The detective listened, taking notes, his expression neutral. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. Here's the thing, Ms. Chen. What you're describing, if true, is a civil employment matter. What Mr. Crane is describing is criminal harassment. The emails you sent were received after your termination, which means they weren't part of any official complaint process. They were sent to damage his professional standing. They were sent to document fraud. Do you have proof of fraud, beyond files you accessed without authorization? Maya met his eyes. Are you investigating the fraud allegations or just the harassment complaint? I'm investigating what I was asked to investigate. Do you have legal representation? Working on it. He stood, gathering the printed emails. I'm going to recommend no charges at this time, but Ms. Chen, I strongly suggest you cease all contact with Mr. Crane and Ridgewood Memorial. Any further emails, calls, or attempts to contact hospital staff could be viewed as a pattern of harassment. Do you understand? She understood perfectly. Crane had outmaneuvered her, turned her evidence into ammunition against her, made her the villain in a story where he was the victim of a disgruntled employee's vendetta. They released her 2 hours later with a warning and a business card for a domestic crisis counselor, another subtle message that she was being coded as unstable, emotional, a woman scorned rather than a witness to corruption. Maya stood outside the police station in the afternoon heat, watching traffic blur past, and felt something inside her crystallize. Rage was useless. Fear was a luxury. What she needed was cold, surgical precision. She needed allies, evidence outside her own testimony, someone with power willing to use it. She pulled out her phone and called Patricia Reeves. It rang 4 times before connecting. Dr. Reeves? This is Maya Chen. We need to talk. There was a long pause. Traffic noise in the background suggested Reeves was outside, maybe between surgeries. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. I heard you were terminated. I'm sorry. Are you? Because you're the one who saw what happened in Crane's office. You know he's falsifying reports, and you're doing nothing. I can't discuss internal hospital matters with a former employee. Even when those matters involve systematic fraud that's putting patients at risk? Reeves exhaled slowly. Ms. Chen, I understand you're upset, but accusations like that require proof and going through proper channels. If you have concerns about patient safety, I had concerns, I reported them, and I was destroyed for it. So now I'm asking you directly, Are you going to help expose what Crane is doing, or are you going to keep protecting your surgical program while patients die from preventable infections? The silence stretched so long Maya thought she'd hung up. Then, there's nothing I can do. He has too much power, too many connections. The board won't act without undeniable proof, and anything I provide would be traced back to me. I have a family, a career. You can't risk it. Got it. Maya's voice was flat. When the news story breaks, try to remember you had a chance to be on the right side. She hung up before Reeves could respond. Crossed another potential ally off her non-existent list. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Derek Townsend, can you come to the station tomorrow? We need you to review the report before it airs. Also, heads up. Crane's lawyers sent a cease and desist. Legal is handling it, but this is getting complicated. Maya texted back, I'll be there. She was walking to her car when her vision caught on something strange. A dog. Not unusual in a city, except this one was sitting perfectly still beside a truck 30 yards away, its attention fixed on her with an intensity that prickled her combat instincts. Not a pet. The posture was wrong, too alert, too controlled. Working dog. Possibly military or police, but no handler in sight, no vest, no obvious purpose. Their eyes met across the parking lot. For 3 seconds, neither moved. Then the dog stood, and Maya's breath caught. She recognized that gait, that particular rolling shoulder movement of a Belgian Malinois compensating for old injuries. Recognized the white scar tissue along its left flank, where shrapnel had torn through muscle and fur. No, not possible. The dog took 3 steps toward her and stopped, head tilting in a gesture so familiar it punched the air from her lungs. Titan? The name came out strangled. The Malinois' ears pricked forward. His tail, what remained of it after the IED blast, twitched once. Maya's mind reeled. Titan had been a Navy K-9, attached to a SEAL team operating out of Camp Leatherneck. She'd treated him 18 months ago after an explosion that should have killed him. Had spent 14 hours in surgery reconstructing his shoulder, removing shrapnel, willing him to survive because he'd already saved 6 lives that week and deserved better than bleeding out in the dirt. She'd been stateside for 3 months when she got word he'd recovered, been transferred to a specialized training program. She'd never expected to see him again, certainly not in a police station parking lot in Baxter Springs. Someone whistled, sharp, authoritative. A man in tactical pants and a fitted black jacket emerged from between vehicles. Mid-30s, military bearing, with the kind of watchful eyes that cataloged threats by reflex. Titan, heel. The dog obeyed instantly, but his gaze never left Maya. The handler approached, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to puzzled recognition as he took in her face, her posture, the way Titan's entire body language had changed. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. He's a working dog, not... He stopped, looked at Titan, looked at Maya. Wait, do you know this animal? Maya's throat was tight. I was the field medic who saved his life. Leatherneck, fall of 23. He'd been hit by an IED. I was told he was transferred to a K-9 program after recovery. The handler's entire demeanor shifted. You're Maya Chen? She nodded slowly. Sergeant Marcus Webb, DOD K-9 Handler Unit. He didn't extend a hand, still processing. Titan's been with Federal Protective Services for 8 months. We were told the medic who operated on him was... He paused. They said you'd left the service under complicated circumstances. I did. But you saved his life. I did my job. Webb studied her for a long moment. Then, carefully, he recognized you. That's not normal. These dogs are trained to focus on their current handler, current mission. Civilian recognition isn't part of the protocol. Titan whined, low, almost subvocal. His eyes tracked Maya with an intensity that transcended training. Some things override protocol, Maya said quietly. Trauma imprints differently. Webb seemed to make a decision. You work around here? He's been agitated all morning. I thought it was the crowd, but now... He gestured to Titan, whose focus hadn't wavered. I've never seen him like this. If you've got a minute, I was just leaving. Wait, Webb's voice sharpened with command instinct. If you're the Chen from his file, there's something you should know. Titan's been assigned to protective detail at Ridgewood Memorial. New contract with the hospital for enhanced security after some incident last month. We rotate between hospitals in the region, but Ridgewood's his primary location as of 3 days ago. Maya's blood turned to ice. You're providing security at Ridgewood? Federal contract, yeah. Why? She looked at Titan, at this ghost from her past life who'd somehow materialized in her present nightmare and felt reality tilt sideways. Of all the hospitals in the region, of all the timing. It's complicated, she managed. Seems to be a theme with you. Webb's tone wasn't unkind. Look, I don't know what brought you to a police station in the middle of the day, and it's not my business. But Titan knows you, trusts you, and that means something. If you're in some kind of trouble, I'm fine. People who are fine don't usually end up at police stations looking like they've been through a combat zone. He glanced at her hands, still slightly trembling from residual adrenaline. You ever need backup or just want to check in on this guy? We're at Ridgewood most weekdays. Security office, 4th floor. 4th floor? Maya repeated numbly. Same floor as the administrative offices. Same floor as Vincent Crane's corner suite. Webb whistled again. A different pattern. Titan reluctantly turned away from Maya, falling into heel position. But as they walked toward their vehicle, the dog looked back 3 times, each glance deliberate and assessing. Maya stood in the parking lot long after they'd driven away, her mind racing through implications and impossible coincidences. Titan was at Ridgewood. Federal security, which meant jurisdiction and authority beyond hospital politics, which meant... She pulled out her phone and texted Derek, "Change your plans. Before you run the story, I need to check something." His response was immediate. "We're on a deadline. What's going on?" "Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Give me 24 hours. She drove home on autopilot, her apartment still bathed in afternoon light, the same space she'd left that morning before police knocked. But something had shifted. Titan's appearance felt like a message from the universe, or fate, or whatever force governed the intersection of past trauma and present crisis. She had a dog who remembered her, a handler with federal clearance. And Vincent Crane had no idea that the enhanced security he'd probably approved to protect his image was about to become his worst nightmare. Maya sat at her kitchen table and began to plan, not with rage this time, but with the cold tactical precision of someone who'd spent years in places where mistakes meant casualties. She mapped the hospital's 4th floor in her mind, noting camera positions, blind spots, the timing of security rounds. If she was going to end this, she needed to be smart, patient, and she needed to make sure that when Crane finally showed his true colors, there'd be a witness with teeth. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. "Ms. Chen?" A woman's voice, official but not hostile. "This is Agent Sarah Voss with the State Medical Board's investigation unit. We received your complaint regarding Ridgewood Memorial Hospital. I'd like to set up an interview to go over the details. Are you available tomorrow morning?" Maya closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I'm available." When she hung up, she allowed herself 1 minute of something that felt like hope. Then she opened her laptop and started writing. Every conversation with Crane, every witness who might corroborate, every piece of evidence she could remember or access. This time, she wasn't fighting alone. This time, she had a war dog in her corner. And this time, Vincent Crane was going to learn what happened when you cornered someone who'd been trained to survive impossible odds. The game had changed. He just didn't know it yet. 2. The interview with Agent Voss lasted 3 hours. Maya sat in a federal building downtown, in a conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and recycled air, walking through every detail while Voss took notes in a leather portfolio and a recording device captured every word. "When you say he altered the reports, can you be specific about the methodology?" Voss was early 40s, with silver threading through her dark hair and the kind of quiet competence that came from years of navigating bureaucratic mazes. Maya pulled up the screenshots on her laptop, rotating the screen. The raw data from the infection control department shows post-surgical infection rates at 11%. The reports submitted to the state show 6.2%. He changed the numbers directly in the database before generating the compliance documents. Voss leaned closer, her pen moving rapidly. "And you accessed these files how?" Through the shared administrative drive. I didn't have authorization, but the system didn't require credentials for view access, only for editing. Maya met her eyes. I know it was technically a violation, but the fraud was happening in plain sight. Plain sight that required director-level access to see. Voss sat back. That's going to be a problem for prosecution. Defense will argue you exceeded your authority, that the access itself was criminal, regardless of what you found. So he gets away with it because I wasn't supposed to know? I didn't say that. I'm telling you what we're up against. Voss tapped her pen against the portfolio. I need corroboration. Someone else who saw the alterations. Someone with legitimate access who can testify without the taint of unauthorized entry. Maya thought of Patricia Reeves, of Deanna Park, of the countless staff members who'd seen pieces of the truth but lacked the courage or evidence to speak. Dr. Reeves confronted him about it. I overheard the conversation through the wall. But you didn't record it, and she hasn't filed a complaint. Because she's terrified of him. They all are. Voss's expression softened slightly. Fear is a powerful motivator for silence. Unfortunately, it's a terrible foundation for a legal case. She closed the portfolio. Here's where we are. Your complaint opens an investigation. I can subpoena records, interview staff, audit, the database for evidence of alterations. But this process takes months, sometimes years. And Crane will know we're coming the moment I serve the first subpoena. He'll have time to cover tracks, pressure witnesses, build a defense. So what do I do? Just wait while he continues endangering patients? You let me do my job, and you stay away from Ridgewood Memorial. Don't contact staff, don't approach Crane, don't give him any ammunition to paint you as a vindictive former employee. Voss stood, extending a business card. I'll be in touch. In the meantime, if you remember anything else, call me directly. Maya took the card, feeling the weight of institutional process settling over her like a shroud. Justice moved slowly. Revenge moved fast. And every day that investigation crept forward was another day Crane controlled the narrative. She left the federal building with less hope than she'd arrived with. The reporter, the state agent, the lawyer she'd consulted that morning, all of them promised action while cautioning patience. All of them operated within systems Crane had spent 15 years learning to manipulate. Her phone buzzed as she reached her car. Derek Townsend. Legal gave us the green light. Story runs Friday night. Can you be available for follow-up interviews? Friday was 4 days away. 4 days for Crane to prepare, to spin, to deploy whatever resources he had to minimize damage. But it was also 4 days of exposure, of public scrutiny he couldn't control. Maya texted back. I'll be ready. She drove toward Ridgewood Memorial without consciously deciding to. Told herself she was just passing through the area, just wanted to see the building from the outside, remind herself what she was fighting for. But as she pulled into the public lot, not the employee entrance where she'd been escorted out, but the visitor parking near the main entrance, she knew she was looking for something specific. The security office, 4th floor, where Marcus Webb and Titan would be stationed. She had no plan beyond confirmation. Needed to see with her own eyes that the dog was real, that the federal presence wasn't a stress-induced hallucination from yesterday's interrogation. Needed to know if the universe had actually handed her an ally or just another cruel coincidence. The main entrance opened into a soaring atrium with marble floors and abstract art that screamed expensive donations. Maya had never entered through the front. Staff used side entrances, service elevators, the utilitarian spaces hidden from public view. Here, everything was polished and pristine, designed to project competence and care. The visitor desk was staffed by an elderly volunteer who smiled warmly. Can I help you find someone? I'm looking for the security office. 4th floor? Oh, that's in the administrative wing. Take those elevators to 4, turn right, all the way to the end of the hall. The volunteer's smile never wavered. Are you delivering something? Just checking in with an old colleague. The lie came easily. Maya crossed to the elevators, acutely aware of cameras tracking her movement. If Crane was monitoring feeds, if security flagged her badge from yesterday's ban, she'd be stopped before she reached the 4th floor. But the elevator arrived empty, carried her upward without incident, and opened onto a hallway she knew too well. The administrative wing looked the same. Cream walls, corporate art. the muted hum of offices where the real business of healthcare happened. Maya turned right, passing closed doors with nameplates: finance, human resources, quality assurance, until she reached a frosted glass door labeled simply security. She knocked twice. "It's open." Marcus Webb sat behind a desk covered in monitors showing different hospital angles. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before professional neutrality locked in. "Ms. Chen, didn't expect to see you back here." "I was in the area." Maya glanced at the monitors, noting camera positions she'd memorized weeks ago. "Thought I'd check on Titan." "He's on patrol with Jenkins right now. Should be back in 20 minutes. Webb gestured to a chair across from his desk. "You want to tell me why you're really here?" "What makes you think there's another reason?" "Because people don't casually drop by security offices in hospitals where they used to work, especially not the day after police questioning." He leaned back, studying her. "I asked around after we met yesterday. You were terminated from Ridgewood 5 days ago for cause, unauthorized file access according to the official record." Maya's jaw tightened. "That's the sanitized version. Usually is. What's the real version?" She shouldn't trust him, shouldn't expose herself to someone who might report directly to hospital administration. But Webb had the kind of eyes that had seen things, the posture of someone who'd operated in places where official versions and truth rarely aligned. "The director is falsifying state reports to hide infection rates. I found proof," he found out, "and I was terminated before I could do anything about it." She met his gaze. "The police interrogation yesterday was because he filed harassment charges after I sent the evidence to journalists and state investigators." Webb absorbed this without expression. "That's a serious allegation." "It's the truth." "Even if it is, why come here? You've already reported it. Coming back just gives him ammunition." "Because a news story runs Friday, and when it does, Crane is going to go scorched earth trying to discredit me. I need to know if there are any adults in this building who might actually care about patient safety over protecting their director." "And you think federal security falls into that category?" "I think you're not hospital employees. I think you answer to different authority. And I think if Titan recognized me after 18 months, your handlers taught him to remember more than just commands." Maya leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking if you'd be willing to document what you see. Because something is going to break this week, and when it does, I want someone watching who can't be fired or intimidated into silence." Webb was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk. Then he pulled up a different monitor, this one showing a hallway Maya recognized, the 4th floor administrative corridor. "We've been here 3 weeks. Our contract is Federal Protective Services for high-value facilities with government research components. Ridgewood has a DoD-funded biotech lab in the basement, so we rotate through for compliance." "I didn't know that." "Most people don't. It's not publicized." He switched camera angles. "In 3 weeks, I've logged 14 separate incidents of verbal altercations involving senior staff. Nothing actionable, just pattern observation. Your director, Crane, appears in 11 of those incidents." Maya's pulse quickened. "What kind of altercations?" "Staff arguing in hallways, raised voices behind closed doors. On 3 occasions, physical positioning that read as intimidation, backing someone against a wall, blocking exits, invading personal space." He pulled up a log, rotating the screen toward her. "I document everything. It's protocol. And I've been wondering when someone was going to officially notice that Ridgewood's administrative culture is toxic." "Can I see the footage?" "Absolutely not. That's federal evidence secured under contract. I can't share it without a warrant or direct order from my chain of command." His expression didn't change. "But if a state investigator requested it as part of an official inquiry, I'd be obligated to provide access." Maya pulled out Agent Voss's card, sliding it across the desk. "Sarah Voss, State Medical Board Investigations. She's leading the inquiry into Crane." Webb photographed the card with his phone. "I'll make sure she knows we have relevant security footage." It wasn't much, but it was something. Documentation from a source Crane couldn't threaten or fire. Independent verification that his behavior extended beyond Maya's allegations. The door opened. A younger man in matching tactical gear entered, Titan padding beside him on a loose lead. The dog's head swiveled immediately toward Maya, his entire body going alert. "Jenkins, this is Maya Chen. She's the medic from Titan's file." Jenkins looked between them, clearly confused. "The one who—" Wait, seriously? He glanced at Titan, whose focus hadn't wavered from Maya. He's been weird all week. I thought maybe he was sick or something. He remembers her. Webb stood, moving around the desk. Titan, sit. The dog obeyed but kept his eyes locked on Maya, a low whine building in his throat. Can I? Maya gestured toward him. Webb nodded. Slowly. She approached the way she'd approached injured animals in the field, calm, steady, letting him process her scent and presence. Titan's whining intensified, his tail stub twitching. When she knelt within reach, he lunged forward, not aggressive but desperate, pressing his head against her chest. Maya's hands found the familiar contours of his skull, the places where shrapnel scars interrupted his coat. Hey buddy, yeah, it's me. You remember. Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Titan leaned his full weight into her, trembling, not from fear or aggression, but from something deeper. Recognition, relief, the kind of bond forged in trauma that transcended training and time. Jenkins whistled low. I've never seen him like this. He's usually all business. Some connections override protocol, Webb said quietly. He was watching Maya with new assessment in his eyes. You must have made quite an impression. I kept him alive when staying alive wasn't guaranteed. Maya scratched behind Titan's ears, feeling the tension gradually ease from his frame. We spent 2 weeks together in recovery. I was the only constant in a world that had just tried to kill him. That kind of imprint doesn't fade. Webb checked his watch. Jenkins, take 5. I need to brief Miss Chen on something. The younger handler nodded, stepping outside. Webb waited until the door closed before speaking. Titan's been agitated every time we patrol the 4th floor administrative wing. Specific behavior, hackles raised, low growling, focused attention on one particular office. He pulled up footage showing the dog pausing outside a familiar door, body tense. That's Vincent Crane's office. We've passed it maybe 20 times. Every single time, same reaction. Maya stared at the screen. Dogs can sense threat. Military dogs are trained to sense explosives, drugs, specific chemical signatures. They don't just randomly dislike people. Webb's tone was carefully neutral. But they do react to fear pheromones, to elevated stress markers, to the kind of adrenaline spike that happens when someone's genuinely dangerous. You think Titan knows Crane is a threat. I think Titan's been trying to tell us something, and we've been dismissing it as random behavior. He closed the footage. If your allegations are true, and Crane has been intimidating staff, assaulting employees, creating a culture of fear, those are threat indicators a trained K9 would absolutely pick up on. Maya's mind raced. Could you testify to that? The behavioral pattern? If subpoenaed, yes, but it's circumstantial. A defense attorney would rip it apart. The dog doesn't like someone isn't evidence of wrongdoing. He paused. However, if Titan were present during an actual incident, his response would be documented, recorded, and admissible as contemporaneous observation. The implication hung between them. If Crane made a move, if he threatened someone while Titan was nearby, if the dog's training kicked in and he reacted to a genuine threat in real time. You're saying I should be here when he shows his true colors, Maya said slowly. I'm saying if you're going to be anywhere near this hospital, you should know that federal security operates independently of hospital administration. We don't report to Crane. We report to DoD contract oversight. Webb held her gaze. And if we observe criminal behavior in the course of our duties, we're obligated to document and report it. Maya understood. He was offering coverage, not protection, but documentation. A federal witness to whatever came next. The news story runs Friday, she said. When it does, Crane is going to react. He'll rage, he'll threaten, he'll try to control the damage however he can. And you think that reaction might be worth observing. I think a cornered animal is most dangerous when it realizes the trap is closing. Webb considered this. Friday's 2 days out. We're scheduled for standard patrol rotations. 4th floor, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., with random checks overnight. He pulled out a business card, writing a number on the back. That's my cell. If anything develops that requires immediate security response, use it. Maya pocketed the card. Titan was still leaning against her, his breathing steady now, the agitation gone. She stroked his head one more time before standing. Thank you, she said, for listening, for documenting, for not dismissing me as a disgruntled ex-employee. I've seen enough institutional cover-ups to recognize the pattern. Webb opened the door. Be careful, Ms. Chen. Men like Crane don't go down easy. They take people with them. She left through the main entrance, Titan's warmth still imprinted on her chest, and drove home through afternoon traffic that blurred into white noise. The pieces were moving. Voss had her investigation. Derek had his story. Webb had his footage. And somewhere in the building she'd just left, Vincent Crane was going about his day, unaware that the walls were closing in. Maya spent that evening preparing. She printed every email, every document, every piece of correspondence that proved her timeline, created a master file organized by date and incident type, backed it up to 3 different cloud services and 1 physical drive she sealed in an envelope addressed to her lawyer. If something happened to her, if Crane escalated beyond threats, someone would know why. Her phone rang at 10 p.m. Deanna Park, the veteran nurse who'd slipped her a phone number during her humiliating exit. Maya, it's Deanna. I need to tell you something. Her voice was tight, stressed. Crane called a mandatory staff meeting for tomorrow morning. All nurses, both shifts. He says it's about malicious rumors and protecting hospital reputation. Maya's stomach dropped. He's getting ahead of the story. He's going to crucify you. He didn't say your name, but everyone knows. He's already been talking to supervisors, planting seeds about your instability, your unauthorized access, your vendetta against him. Deanna paused. Some people are buying it. Some are scared, but there are a few of us who remember what happened to Simmons, to others before her. We know his pattern. Can you document the meeting? Record it if possible? I can try. But Maya, you need to understand, most staff won't stand with you publicly. The fear runs too deep. Even people who believe you won't risk their jobs. I'm not asking them to. I just need the truth on record, one way or another. After hanging up, Maya pulled out her laptop and drafted an email to Derek Townsend. Crane's meeting was damage control, an attempt to frame the narrative before the news story dropped. But it also proved he was worried enough to call an emergency meeting, worried enough to actively campaign against allegations that hadn't even been publicly reported yet. Guilty behavior. The kind prosecutors loved. She hit send and tried to sleep. Failed. Spent the night staring at her ceiling, running through scenarios. Best case, the story aired, the investigation proceeded, and justice eventually caught up. Worst case, Crane's lawyers buried everything. The hospital circled wagons, and she became a cautionary tale about whistleblowers who didn't know when to stay silent. There were scenarios between those extremes, variations where some truth emerged but Crane survived, where settlements happened behind closed doors and NDAs sealed the story forever. Maya had lived through enough combat to know that plans rarely survived contact with reality. What mattered was adaptability, resilience, the willingness to keep fighting even when the odds looked impossible. Thursday morning arrived gray and threatening rain. Maya dressed carefully, professional but not formal, the kind of outfit that said credible witness rather than angry ex-employee. She wasn't planning to go to Ridgewood, wasn't planning to confront Crane or attend his propaganda meeting, but she drove past the hospital anyway, some magnetic pull drawing her to orbit the building where her life had imploded. The parking lots were full, both shifts overlapping for the mandatory meeting. She imagined them all crammed into the main conference room, Crane at the podium, spinning his version of events. Her phone buzzed. Derek. Crane's lawyers filed an injunction to block the story, claimed defamation, demanded to see our sources. Legal is fighting it, but we might not air tomorrow. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Of course he'd try to kill the story. Of course his lawyers were already moving to protect him. Money and power always had better legal representation than truth. She texted back, "What do you need from me?" "Nothing yet. Just wanted you to know it's getting ugly. They're threatening the station with lawsuits, claiming you're an unreliable source with a grudge. If we run this, it needs to be bulletproof." Maya parked in a coffee shop lot across from the hospital and opened her email. Sent Agent Voss everything she'd documented about Crane's meeting, about his preemptive damage control, about the pattern of intimidation. Sent copies to the lawyer, to Derek, to 3 separate cloud accounts. Then she sent one more email, to Patricia Reeves. "Dr. Reeves, I know you're scared, I know speaking up feels impossible when your career hangs in the balance, but silence enables him. Every day you stay quiet is another day he has power over someone else. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to think about why you became a doctor, what that oath meant before institutional politics corrupted it. The story breaks tomorrow, one way or another. You have a choice about which side of history you want to be on. She sent it before she could second-guess the words. Knew it probably wouldn't matter that Reeves had already made her choice by staying silent this long. But Maya needed to try, needed to know she'd exhausted every possible avenue. At 11 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Chen, this is Margaret from Mr. Crane's office. The assistant's voice was strained, professional. Mr. Crane would like to meet with you this afternoon. 2 o'clock, his office. He says it's important. Every instinct screamed trap. I'm not interested. He was very insistent, said he wants to discuss a possible resolution to recent misunderstandings. Margaret lowered her voice. Please. He's been volatile all morning. If you refuse, I don't know what he'll do. That sounds like a threat. It's a warning from someone who's worked for him long enough to recognize when he's spiraling. A pause. I'm not asking you to trust him. I'm asking you to consider that cornered animals do unpredictable things. Maybe it's better to face him in a controlled environment than wait for him to come to you. Maya's mind raced. A meeting in his office, on his territory, with him controlling the space and narrative. Everything about it screamed danger. But Margaret was right about one thing. Crane was spiraling. The emergency meeting, the legal injunctions, the desperate attempt to control a situation that was slipping through his fingers. Men like him didn't de-escalate. They doubled down. 2 o'clock, Maya said. But I'm bringing someone. He specified you come alone. Then he can specify disappointment. 2 o'clock, and I'll have a witness, or we do this through lawyers and courtrooms. She hung up before Margaret could respond, pulled out Webb's card and called his cell. Webb, it's Maya Chen. Crane wants a meeting this afternoon. His office, 2 p.m. I know it's a trap, but I think I need to walk into it anyway. That's a terrible idea. I know, but he's escalating, and I'd rather control when and how than wait for him to show up at my apartment. She took a breath. You said if I needed security response to call. I'm calling. Webb was silent for a moment. What exactly are you asking? I'm asking if federal security does wellness checks on hospital administrative staff. If you happen to be conducting one on the 4th floor around 2 p.m. and happen to be in the vicinity if anything goes wrong. That's not really our mandate. Dogs can sense threat, right? What if Titan needs to patrol that specific hallway? What if his behavioral alerts require investigation? Another pause. Then, we do have scheduled rounds at 1:45. If those rounds took us past Crane's office around the time of your meeting, that would be coincidental but documented. That's all I'm asking. Chen, if this goes sideways, if he becomes physically aggressive or threatening, our protocol is to intervene and report. You understand that means police involvement, statements, the whole 9 yards. I'm counting on it. All right? But I'm putting Jenkins on standby with a direct line to local PD. Any sign of danger, we're pulling you out. Maya spent the next 2 hours preparing like she was gearing up for a mission. She dressed in layers, nothing he could easily grab. Flat shoes she could run in. Her phone fully charged with emergency contacts on speed dial. A small audio recorder in her pocket, illegal in some jurisdictions, but she didn't care anymore about technical violations. At 1:45, she parked in the visitor lot and walked through the main entrance like she belonged. The volunteer at the desk smiled the same warm, oblivious smile. The elevator carried her to the 4th floor without incident. The hallway was quiet, most staff still at lunch or scattered through the building. Maya walked toward Crane's office, her heart rate elevated but controlled, every sense on high alert. Marcus Webb and Titan appeared from around a corner, the dog on a standard patrol lead. Their eyes met briefly. Webb gave an almost imperceptible nod. She knocked on Crane's door at precisely 2 p.m. Come in. Vincent Crane sat behind his massive desk, the picture of controlled authority. His suit was immaculate. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes were cold, calculating, predatory. Maya, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from him. Please, sit. She remained standing. Your assistant said you wanted to discuss resolution. I do. Close the door. I'm comfortable with it open. His smile thinned. I'm not. This is a private conversation. Then we don't have much to discuss. Maya turned toward the door. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. She stopped, turned back slowly. What kind of settlement? Crane opened a folder on his desk, pulling out papers. 6 months' salary, a neutral reference, in exchange for a signed NDA and your agreement to retract all allegations. You withdraw your complaints to the state board, you tell your journalist friend the story was based on misunderstandings, and we all move forward. You want me to lie? I want you to accept reality. You're not going to win this fight. I have lawyers, resources, institutional support. You have anger and stolen files. He pushed the papers toward her. This offer expires when you leave this office. Take it, or I bury you so deep you'll never work in healthcare again. Maya walked to the desk, looking down at the settlement agreement. It was generous by most standards, more money than she'd make in months, protection from the professional blackballing he'd threatened. All she had to do was let him win. Let him continue endangering patients. Let the next woman who discovered his secrets face the same impossible choice. No, she said simply. Crane's face darkened. You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. He stood abruptly, rounding the desk. You think you're brave? Righteous? You're a nobody playing at being a hero. The news story won't run. My lawyers are killing it as we speak. The state investigation will find nothing because I've already sanitized the records. And you'll be left with nothing but a termination on your record and a reputation as an unstable troublemaker. Maybe. But I'll know the truth. And so will you. The truth is irrelevant compared to power. He moved closer, invading her space the way he had weeks ago. You should have stayed quiet. Should have taken the easy road. Now you've forced my hand. Is that another threat? It's a promise. You wanted war? Fine. I'll destroy your credibility, your career, everything you've worked for. And when I'm done, you'll wish you'd taken the settlement. Maya held her ground, even as every instinct screamed to retreat. You're right about one thing. I'm not a hero. I'm just tired of men like you assuming my silence is guaranteed. Your silence is guaranteed because you have nothing. No proof, no witnesses, no... The door burst open. Not Webb, not security. Patricia Reeves stood in the doorway, her face pale but determined, holding a manila folder. She has me, Reeves said quietly. And she has these. She held up the folder. Original infection reports, before you altered them. I've been keeping copies for 2 years, waiting for someone brave enough to stand up first. Crane's face went white. Patricia, you don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm tired of watching you sacrifice patient safety for your career. Reeves walked into the office, setting the folder on his desk. Maya was right. I took an oath. Time I remembered what it meant. The hallway behind Reeves was suddenly crowded. Deanna Park. 3 other nurses Maya recognized. Even Margaret, Crane's assistant, standing at the back of the group. We all heard him, Deanna said, holding up her phone. The whole meeting, the threats, the admission about sanitizing records, everything. We recorded it. The Crane looked between them, his carefully constructed power crumbling in real time. You're all fired. Every single one of you. Actually, Webb's voice cut through the chaos as he stepped into view, Titan at his side. You don't have that authority anymore. Federal Protective Services has been monitoring this situation for potential criminal activity. Everything that just happened was captured on security footage and audio. Titan's attention was locked on Crane, a low growl building in his chest. Not random agitation this time. Focused, deliberate threat assessment, Crane backed against his desk, trapped by witnesses and his own words. This is entrapment, illegal recording. None of this is admissible. Actually, hospital security footage is always admissible, Webb said calmly. And when federal contractors observe potential criminal activity, we're mandated to report it. Local PD is already en route. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Crane's expression twisted into something ugly, desperate. You think this changes anything? I'll fight this. My lawyers will tear you apart. This hospital needs me. This hospital needs patients to survive surgery, Reeves interrupted. Something they're not doing at acceptable rates because you've been hiding the data. That's fraud, Vincent. Criminal fraud. The siren stopped outside. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, officers ascending, responding to Webb's call. Maya stood perfectly still, watching Vincent Crane's world collapse around him, watching every assumption he'd made about power and silence prove catastrophically wrong. Titan's growl deepened. The dog strained against Webb's hold, every muscle coiled, reading the threat Crane represented with perfect clarity. "Call him off," Crane demanded, his voice cracking. "He's not attacking," Webb said. "He's doing what he was trained to do, identifying danger. You should be grateful he's disciplined enough to wait for my command." 2 uniformed officers appeared at the door, taking in the crowded office, the obvious tension. The senior officer looked at Webb. "We got a call about a disturbance? And documentation of potential criminal activity, threats, intimidation, and admission of falsifying state medical reports." Webb gestured to his body cam. "All recorded on federal security equipment." The officer's attention shifted to Crane. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning. I'm not going anywhere without my lawyer." "That's your right, but we need you to come to the station regardless." The officer stepped into the office, hand resting casually on his belt. "You can call your lawyer from there." For a moment, Maya thought Crane might actually resist, might lunge for the door or try to bull his way through the crowd. But he saw what she saw, Titan poised to intercept, Webb's hand on his collar, ready to release if the threat became action. Crane's shoulders sagged. The predator, faced with actual consequences for the first time in 15 years, deflated into a tired, angry man. "This isn't over," he said, looking directly at Maya. "Yes," she replied softly. "It is." The officers escorted him out, reading him his rights in calm, professional tones. The crowd parted, staff members watching their director's perp walk with expressions ranging from satisfaction to shock to relief. Reeves approached Maya, the folder still in her hands. "I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. Sorry you had to fight alone." "You did it when it mattered." Maya gestured to the folder. "That's original documentation. 2 years' worth. Every time he altered a report, I saved the original. I told myself it was insurance, but really it was cowardice. I was waiting for someone else to take the risk first." Reeves's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "You were braver than all of us." "I was angrier," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." Webb approached, Titan now calm beside him. "Agent Voss is going to want copies of everything. The hospital board will probably try damage control, but with federal involvement and media attention, they won't be able to bury this." "The story," Maya said suddenly. "Derek, the reporter. Crane's lawyers were trying to kill it." "Not anymore. Criminal charges make it news, not defamation." Webb checked his phone. "In fact, you might want to give him a call. Pretty sure his legal department just got very excited about tonight's broadcast." Maya stepped into the hallway, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. The adrenaline was crashing now, leaving her simultaneously exhausted and electric. Derek answered on the first ring. "Please tell me you have news." "Crane was just arrested. Federal security has footage of him threatening me, admitting to falsifying reports, the whole thing. And I have witnesses. Hospital staff who recorded him at his emergency meeting." Silence. Then, "Holy shit. Maya, this is massive. Can you be at the station in an hour? We're moving the story to the top of tonight's broadcast." "I'll be there." She hung up and leaned against the wall, feeling the full weight of the day settle over her. Deanna appeared beside her, offering a bottle of water. "You okay?" "Ask me tomorrow." Maya drank, the cold water grounding her. "What happens now? For all of you, I mean. Crane can't fire you, but his allies on the board will have to be very careful about retaliation when there are federal investigators watching." Deanna's smile was grim. "Besides, we're prepared to make a lot of noise if anyone tries. Strength in numbers, right?" The hallway was emptying now, staff returning to duties, processing what they'd witnessed. Webb remained near Crane's office, coordinating with the officers, documenting everything for his report. Titan padded over to Maya, pressing against her leg. She scratched his ears absently, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Good boy," she murmured. You knew all along, didn't you? Knew he was dangerous. The dog's tail stub wagged once, as if to say obviously. Webb finished with the officers and joined her. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in years. Walking into a meeting with a man who'd already threatened you, hoping things would escalate enough to trigger intervention. Sometimes you have to give predators enough rope, Maya said. Crane thought he could intimidate me into silence one more time. He didn't know I'd brought the cavalry. Federal Protective Services isn't really cavalry. We're more like really well-armed witnesses. Close enough. Her phone buzzed. Agent Voss. Got a call from Baxter Springs PD. You okay? Need anything from me? Maya texted back, I'm fine. Have multiple witnesses and documentation ready to share. Reeves has original reports. The response was immediate. Good. I'm expediting the investigation. This just became priority 1. Maya pocketed her phone and looked at the office that had been Crane's kingdom for 15 years. Now it was just an empty room with expensive furniture, stripped of the power its occupant had wielded. I should go, she said to Webb. News interview, formal statements, probably a very long night. Before you do, Webb pulled out a business card, different from the one he'd given her before. That's my supervisor. If you need federal protection, witness security, anything like that, call him directly. What you just did made you a target for anyone with a stake in keeping Ridgewood's problems buried. I'll be careful. I'm serious, Chen. Board members, investors, other staff who benefit from the status quo, they're not going to be happy about public exposure. Watch your back. She took the card, added it to the growing collection of numbers and contacts that represented her makeshift support system. Then she knelt beside Titan one more time. Thank you, she told the dog, for remembering, for being here, for being exactly what I needed when I needed it most. Titan licked her hand, his brown eyes steady and knowing. Maya stood, nodded to Webb and the remaining staff, and walked toward the elevator. Each step felt surreal, like moving through a dream where consequences finally caught up to actions, where accountability arrived after years of absence. The news interview was exactly as exhausting as anticipated. Derek grilled her for an hour, asking for details, verification, emotional context. His camera operator captured every word while legal reviewed her statements in real time. When it finally aired at 6 p.m., Maya watched from her apartment, phone in hand, ready for the fallout. The story was devastating. Derek's investigation laid out the timeline, the falsified reports, the pattern of intimidation, the systematic cover-up. They showed footage of Crane being escorted by police, played excerpts of his threats caught on security recordings, interviewed Patricia Reeves about the culture of fear, and they centered Maya's experience, the retaliation, the termination, the harassment charges that were revealed to be false after federal review. By 7 p.m., the hospital's main number was overwhelmed. By 8, the board had released a statement suspending Crane pending investigation and promising full cooperation with authorities. By 9, 3 more former employees had come forward with their own stories of intimidation and abuse. Maya's phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, advocacy groups, former colleagues. She let most go to voicemail, answering only Agent Voss and the support network that had materialized in Crane's office. At 10 p.m., she finally allowed herself to breathe, to sit in the silence of her apartment and process that the worst was over, that she'd survived not just Crane's retaliation, but the entire rotten system that had protected him. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number that revealed itself in the first line. This is Marcus Webb. Just wanted you to know Titan's been calm all evening. I think he knows the threat is contained. Maya smiled, tears surprising her. She replied, Tell him I said thank you for everything. The response came quickly. He knows. She set down her phone and walked to her window, looking out at Baxter Springs' lights spreading below. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more statements, more legal maneuvering. The investigation would grind forward with bureaucratic slowness. Crane would fight with expensive lawyers and every resource at his disposal. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Maya slept without calculating exit routes or checking door locks. Slept without the weight of secrets crushing her chest. She woke to her phone ringing at 6 a.m., heart pounding, instinct screaming that this was it, Crane's lawyers with new charges, or hospital security with trespassing allegations, or something worse she hadn't anticipated. But the caller ID showed Agent Voss. "Chen, you need to see this." Voss's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "Check your email, now." Maya grabbed her laptop, pulling up her inbox. The first message was from an address she didn't recognize. Subject line, Ridgewood Memorial, complete financial records. She opened it. Attached were hundreds of files, internal audits, budget reports, contractor payments, board meeting minutes. A digital paper trail of every financial irregularity at Ridgewood for the past decade. "What is this?" Maya breathed. "Anonymous whistleblower. Sent to me, to the FBI, to the State Attorney General, and to every major news outlet in the region." Voss paused. Someone inside Ridgewood just nuked the entire institution from orbit. "And Chen? Your name is all over the documentation as the person who started asking the right questions." Maya's hands were shaking as she scrolled through files showing embezzlement, kickbacks, fraudulent billing schemes that made Crane's infection statistics look like petty theft. "Who sent this?" "No idea. IP address routes through a dozen proxies. But whoever they are, they just turned a single corruption case into a full-scale criminal investigation." Voss's voice carried grim satisfaction. "Ridgewood Memorial is going to be crawling with federal agents by noon, and Vincent Crane just became the least of their problems." Maya hung up and stared at her screen, at the avalanche of evidence that would reshape the hospital's entire leadership structure. She thought of Margaret, Crane's assistant, who'd warned her about volatile behavior, of Reeves, who'd kept copies for years, of anonymous staff who'd watched corruption metastasize and finally found their moment to act. One person had stood up, and the dam broke. Her phone rang again. Derek this time. "You still want that job?" His voice was almost gleeful. "Because every hospital in the state is about to be under scrutiny for compliance issues. The good ones will be desperate for staff with integrity, the ones actually committed to patient safety. You're about to be very employable." Maya laughed, surprising herself. "Let's get through the investigation first." "Fair. But Chen, you just changed healthcare in this entire region. You know that, right?" She didn't feel like she'd changed anything. Felt like she'd barely survived a war she hadn't chosen to fight. But when she opened her news feed and saw Ridgewood Memorial trending, saw the outpouring of support from other whistleblowers and advocacy groups, saw the first glimmers of actual systemic change. Maybe Derek was right. Her apartment buzzer sounded. Harsh, unexpected. Maya approached the intercom cautiously. Delivery for Maya Chen. She went downstairs to find a courier holding a small package. No return address, just her name and apartment number in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single item, a dog toy, well worn with teeth marks and faded fabric, and a note in precise block letters. "He wanted you to have this. Thanks for teaching him that some people are worth protecting. Webb." Maya clutched the toy, tears streaming now, all the emotions she'd compartmentalized for weeks finally breaking through. She thought of Titan, of the impossible coincidence that had brought a war dog and his former medic together at exactly the right moment, of Webb's quiet support, of Reeves finding her courage, of Deanna and the others finally speaking up. She thought she was alone, thought she'd have to fight this battle isolated and outmatched. But she'd been wrong. The cavalry had arrived, just not in the form she expected. Maya was still holding the dog toy when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost sent it to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Is this Maya Chen?" A woman's voice, young, nervous. "Yes. My name is Rachel Simmons. I was the nurse who filed a complaint against Vincent Crane last year, the one who was transferred and quit." A shaky breath. "I just saw the news, and I wanted to say thank you for doing what I couldn't, for finishing what I started." Maya's throat tightened. "You survived. That took courage, too." "I ran. You stood and fought. That's different." Simmons paused. "I'm willing to testify now. If investigators want my statement, I'll give it. What he did to me, what I saw him do to others, it's all on record. I just needed to know someone would actually listen." "They're listening now. Because of you." After they hung up, Maya sat in her apartment's morning light, the dog toy in her lap, and let herself feel something close to hope. Vincent Crane was in custody. The investigation was expanding. The system that had protected him was crumbling. And across the region, voices that had been silenced for years were starting to speak. It wasn't justice yet, but it was the beginning. Her phone buzzed with another unknown caller. She let it go to voicemail this time, needing just a moment to breathe. The message started playing automatically. Ms. Chen, this is Director Walsh from St. Catherine's Medical Center. We're currently reviewing our compliance procedures, and I understand you have extensive experience in quality assurance and patient safety protocols. I'd like to discuss a position we're looking to fill: senior oversight, direct board reporting, independent authority to investigate and report concerns. If you're interested, please call me back at your earliest convenience. 3 more voicemails followed, 2 from hospitals, 1 from a state regulatory agency offering a consulting position on healthcare transparency reform. The world had shifted. Maya Chen was no longer the disgruntled ex-employee. She was the nurse who'd exposed institutional corruption, the whistleblower who'd triggered the largest healthcare investigation in the state's history. She'd been called a troublemaker, and she'd proven them right, but in ways they never anticipated. Her doorbell rang, not the buzzer. Someone was directly at her apartment door. Maya checked the peephole and saw the last person she expected: Patricia Reeves, still in her surgical scrubs, looking exhausted and determined. She opened the door. Dr. Reeves? I needed to tell you something in person. Reeves stepped inside without waiting for invitation. The board met this morning in emergency session. Crane suspended without pay pending criminal investigation. 5 other administrators are under review, and they've asked me to serve as interim director of operations while they search for permanent leadership. Maya blinked. That's significant. It's terrifying, but I said yes on one condition. Reeves met her eyes. That they create a new position, patient safety advocate, someone with direct reporting authority to the board, immune from departmental pressure, empowered to investigate and expose any concerns about quality of care or institutional corruption. That's a good idea. I want you to fill it. Maya's breath caught. What? You were right about everything. About Crane, about the culture, about the cost of silence. Ridgewood needs someone who can't be intimidated or bought. Someone who's already proven they'll choose patience over politics. Reeves pulled out a formal letter. This is an official offer. Salary above your previous nursing position, direct board oversight, and complete autonomy in your investigation. Say yes. Maya took the letter with numb fingers, reading words that seemed impossible. A return to Ridgewood. Not as a floor nurse, but as the exact position that might have prevented Crane's abuses in the first place. I need to think about it. Of course. But Chen, Maya, you've already changed this hospital. Come back and make sure those changes stick. Make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. After Reeves left, Maya sat with the offer letter, the job offers, the voicemails from reporters and investigators and advocacy groups all wanting pieces of her story. She'd wanted to disappear after leaving the military, had chosen nursing because it seemed safe, contained, a way to atone without drawing attention. Instead, she'd stumbled into another war, and somehow, impossibly, she'd won. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. Marcus Webb. Turn on Channel 7, he said without preamble. Now. Maya grabbed her remote, switching to the local news. The anchor was mid-sentence, breaking news banner scrolling across the bottom. Ridgewood Memorial Director charged with fraud, assault, conspiracy. The screen cut to footage of Vincent Crane in an orange jumpsuit being arraigned in county court. His expensive suit was gone, his confident bearing demolished. He looked small, ordinary, stripped of every trapping of power that had made him dangerous. Federal charges were just filed, Webb continued. FBI took over the investigation after that anonymous data dump. Turns out Crane wasn't just falsifying reports. He was part of a contractor kickback scheme that goes back years. Medical supplies, equipment purchases, the whole thing rigged. How long will he be in prison? If they prove everything, 20 to 30 years, maybe more. Webb paused. Your complaint started this. But what came after? That's a dozen people finding courage because you went first. You know that, right? Maya watched Crane shuffle past cameras, avoided eye contact with reporters, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just tired relief that he couldn't hurt anyone else. "I should go," Webb said, "but Titan wanted me to tell you he's proud of you." Dogs don't think like that. This one does, trust me. After hanging up, Maya stood at her window, looking toward the hospital complex visible in the distance, the building where she'd been terrorized and terminated, where she'd discovered corruption, where she'd fought back, where she might return, not as victim, but as protector. Her phone buzzed one final time. A text from Deanna Park. "Staff meeting tomorrow. Real one, not Crane's propaganda. Board is addressing everything publicly. Thought you should know." Maya typed back, "Thanks for telling me. Come if you want. Everyone wants to see you. You're kind of a legend now." A legend. Maya almost laughed. She didn't feel legendary, felt battered and bruised and barely holding together. But she'd survived, and she'd made sure Vincent Crane's victims knew they hadn't been ignored, hadn't been forgotten, hadn't been silenced forever. That would have to be enough. She fell asleep that night with the dog toy beside her pillow, dreaming of firefights that transformed into hospital corridors, of enemies who wore white coats instead of uniforms, of a Belgian Malinois who somehow always knew which threats required teeth and which required mercy. When she woke, it was to sunlight and silence and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of safety. And to one more text message sent at 3 a.m. from a number blocked by encryption. "You were right to fight. Some of us have been fighting in the shadows for years. Thank you for bringing this into the light. A friend." Maya never learned who sent the financial records. Never discovered which staff member had gathered years of evidence and waited for the right moment to deploy it. But she understood. Some people fought publicly, some fought in silence. Both mattered. Both counted. She looked at Reeves's offer letter one more time, at the position that would let her protect instead of just patch wounds. Patient safety advocate. Direct authority. Immune to pressure. Everything she'd wished existed when Crane first cornered her in that empty office. She picked up her phone and called Reeves's direct line. "Chen, have you decided?" "I have one condition," Maya said. "Complete transparency in reporting. No NDAs, no sealed settlements, no protecting predators for PR reasons. If I find problems, they get exposed, no matter who it embarrasses." A pause. Then, "Done. When can you start?" Maya thought about the war she'd just survived, the battles still ahead, the broken system that needed people willing to fight for patients over politics. "Monday," she said. "I'll start Monday." She hung up and felt something shift inside her chest. Not closure. There was still too much unfinished, but purpose, direction, the sense that her combat skills hadn't been wasted, just redirected toward a different kind of warfare. Vincent Crane had taught her that monsters existed in sterile hallways and corner offices, that predators wore professional credentials and spoke the language of institutional power. But he'd also taught her something more important, that silence was never guaranteed, that courage could be contagious, and that sometimes refusing to be buried was the most powerful choice of all. She stood, stretched, and began preparing for Monday, for returning to Ridgewood not as prey, but as the thing predators had learned to fear, a witness who refused to forget, a victim who'd become a warrior, a nurse who'd remembered that healing sometimes required cutting out the infection, no matter how deep it had spread. Outside her window, Baxter Springs woke to Friday morning. Somewhere in the city, Vincent Crane sat in a cell, calculating legal strategies and probably still believing he'd find a way out. Somewhere else, a Belgian Malinois finished his patrol rounds, finally calm, the threat he'd sensed for weeks now, safely contained. And in her apartment, Maya Chen packed her bag for her first day back at Ridgewood Memorial, this time with authority, protection, and an entire community watching to make sure justice actually meant something. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in months, Maya wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference. Monday morning arrived with the weight of combat preparation. Maya stood outside Ridgewood Memorial at 7:45, dressed in professional attire that felt like armor, tailored blazer, pressed slacks, the kind of outfit that said she belonged in administrative spaces now, not just on hospital floors. Her badge, freshly printed with her new title, hung from a lanyard around her neck. Patient Safety Advocate. The main entrance felt different, not just because she was entering through the front instead of employee side doors, but because staff noticed her. A nurse she'd worked with during her brief tenure nodded with something that looked like respect. A janitor she'd always greeted smiled wider than protocol required. Word had spread. Everyone knew who she was now, what she'd done. The volunteer at the desk, the same elderly woman who'd directed her to the security office last week, looked up with genuine warmth. "Welcome back, dear doctor. Reeves left instructions you're to go straight to the executive suite, 7th floor." Maya had never been to the 7th floor. That was where the real power lived, the CEO's office, boardroom, the strategic planning spaces where hospital direction got decided. Her stomach tightened as she rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. The doors opened to reveal a space that could have been a corporate headquarters anywhere. Glass walls, modern furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than most nurses made in a year. A receptionist looked up from her desk. "Ms. Chen, Dr. Reeves is expecting you. Conference room B." The conference room held a long table and 6 people, Patricia Reeves at the head. 3 board members Maya didn't recognize, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes who radiated authority, and Marcus Webb, out of his tactical gear, wearing slacks and a button-down that made him look disturbingly professional. Reeves stood. "Maya, thank you for coming. Let me introduce you. Board members Harrison, Chen, no relation, and Vega. This is Catherine Morse, our interim CEO, while we search for permanent leadership. And I believe you know Sergeant Webb." Webb nodded. Maya nodded back, confused about his presence. Morse gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit. We have a lot to cover and not much time." Maya sat, every military instinct screaming that this was a briefing, not a welcome meeting. The energy was wrong, too tense, too urgent. "First," Morse began without preamble, "welcome to your new position. You've been given an impossible job at the worst possible time, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. This hospital is under federal investigation, our reputation is destroyed, patient admissions are down 40%, and staff morale is in the basement. Your role is to rebuild trust, internally and externally, by proving we take patient safety seriously now." "Understood," Maya said. "Second, Vincent Crane's arrest was just the beginning. The FBI's investigation has expanded to include our entire procurement department, 3 senior physicians, and at least 2 board members who've already resigned. Every contract, every vendor relationship, every financial decision from the past decade is being audited." Morse's voice was ice. "We're cooperating fully, which means you'll have access to everything. And I mean everything. No locked doors, no sealed files, no off-limits conversations." One of the board members, Harrison, a man in his 70s with patrician features, cleared his throat. "With appropriate discretion, of course. We can't have internal investigations becoming public spectacles." "Actually," Maya said quietly, "transparency is the entire point of this position. If I find problems, they get reported. No discretion, no PR management, no protecting the institution over patients." Harrison's expression soured. "That's an idealistic position, Miss Chen, but institutional stability is irrelevant if patients are dying from preventable infections." Maya met his gaze. "I was offered this job with one condition: complete autonomy. If that's changed, tell me now." Morse raised a hand. "The condition stands. Harrison, you voted for this position. Don't undermine it on day 1. She turned back to Maya. "You report directly to me and the board. No departmental interference, no administrative pressure. But understand, this makes you a target. Staff who benefited from the old system, physicians with God complexes, administrators protecting their turf, they're going to hate you." "I can handle that." "I'm sure you can. But there's something else you need to know." Morse nodded to Webb, who pulled out a folder. 3 days ago, Webb said, we received a credible threat against hospital staff involved in the Crane investigation. Anonymous tips suggested potential violence from associates or family members of individuals implicated in the fraud. FBI is taking it seriously enough that they've requested enhanced security protocols. Maya's blood chilled. What kind of threat? Non-specific, just enough detail to be concerning without being actionable. Webb opened the folder, revealing printed screenshots. Posted on a dark web forum used by people who solve problems illegally. The post specifically mentioned the nurse who started this and offered payment for making the problem go away. The room temperature seemed to drop. Maya stared at the screenshots. Her name, her apartment address, her vehicle description, all posted alongside a proposed payment schedule. Is this real? She managed. FBI's cyber division is investigating. Could be an angry internet troll. Could be genuine conspiracy to harm. Webb's voice was professionally neutral. Either way, we're treating it as a legitimate threat, which is why Federal Protective Services is extending our contract specifically to provide security for key personnel, including you. Morse leaned forward. You don't have to accept this position, Maya. Given the threats, given the scrutiny, no one would blame you for walking away. We can find someone else, hire external consultants. No. Maya's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I'm not running. Not from threats, not from difficult work. If someone's angry enough to want me dead, it means I'm doing exactly what needs to be done. That's brave, Harrison said. Or foolish. Maybe both. Maya looked at Webb. What does enhanced security mean, practically? Protective detail during work hours, monitoring of your residents, threat assessment and response protocols, and, he paused, we'd like to assign Titan specifically to your detail. His behavioral alerts have proven valuable, and he's already demonstrated protective instincts toward you. Despite everything, Maya felt warmth at the mention of the dog. He'd be with me during hospital operations? And off-site if necessary. He's trained for close protection, threat detection, and emergency response, better than most human bodyguards and harder to bribe. One of the board members, Vega, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, spoke for the first time. We understand this is overwhelming, but we genuinely believe you're the right person for this position. You've already demonstrated more integrity than most people in this building. We're asking you to keep doing that, but with institutional support instead of institutional opposition. Maya looked around the table, at these people who represented the very system that had tried to destroy her weeks ago. They were offering protection, authority, resources, everything she'd lacked when fighting Crane alone. But they were also asking her to trust them, to believe this time would be different. I need guarantees in writing, she said. Complete autonomy, transparent reporting, no retaliation against staff who cooperate with my investigations. And if I find corruption at board level, I report it publicly, not through internal channels that can be buried. Morse didn't hesitate. Done. Legal will have documents ready by end of day. Then I accept. The meeting shifted to logistics, office space, access protocols, initial priorities. Maya was assigned a corner office on the 6th floor with windows overlooking the city and direct sight lines to the main entrance. Her computer access was elevated to administrator level. Her authority extended to interviewing any staff member, reviewing any file, observing any procedure without advance notice. They gave her power, real institutional power, the kind Vincent Crane had wielded for 15 years. The meeting adjourned at 9. Maya followed Reeves to her new office, still processing the threat assessment, the federal protection, the enormity of what she'd agreed to. You look overwhelmed, Reeves observed, unlocking the office door. I am. 2 weeks ago, I was unemployed and facing harassment charges. Now I'm walking around with a target on my back and enough authority to tear this place apart. That's exactly why you're the right choice. Reeves gestured to the empty office, desk, computer, filing cabinets, a small conference table. Most people would use this power to protect themselves, advance their careers, play politics. You'll use it to fix what's broken, even when it's personally dangerous. You don't know that. I know you walked into Crane's office when you could have stayed safe. I know you fought when silence would have been easier. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Reeves moved toward the door, then paused. Fair warning, your first real test comes this afternoon. Department head meeting at 2. Every senior physician and administrator will be there. They're going to want to know what you plan to investigate first. What would you suggest? The truth? All of it. The infection rates, the procurement fraud, the culture of intimidation. But politically, you might want to start with something that shows you're fair, a problem that affects everyone equally, not just Crane's allies. Maya considered this. What about medication errors? Those cross all departments, affect patient safety directly, and usually indicate systemic issues rather than individual corruption. Reeves smiled. See? You're already thinking strategically. Documentation for the past year is in the quality assurance database. Password is on your desk. After Reeves left, Maya sat in her new office, staring at the computer screen. Her email inbox was already flooded. Staff asking questions, administrators requesting meetings, patients and families wanting to tell their stories about substandard care. Each message represented someone who'd been waiting for institutional permission to speak up. She was answering emails when her door opened without a knock. A man in surgical scrubs stood in the doorway, early 50s, with the kind of confidence that came from decades of being the smartest person in the room. "You're the nurse who got Crane arrested." Not a question. His voice carried dismissal like a weapon. "I'm the patient safety advocate who documented fraud that happened to implicate the director." Maya kept her voice level. "Can I help you?" "I'm Dr. Richard Masterson, Chief of Surgery. I heard you're planning to investigate medication errors." "News travels fast." "This is a hospital. Everything travels fast." He stepped inside uninvited. "I'm here to tell you that surgical protocols are not your concern. My department runs independently, with oversight from the medical board, not administrative staff." "I'm not administrative staff. I report directly to the CEO and board of directors." Maya stood, refusing to let him tower over her desk. "And medication errors in surgical contexts absolutely fall under patient safety. If your department has problems, I'll find them." "Is that a threat?" "It's a job description." Masterson's jaw tightened. "You've been here 5 minutes and you're already making enemies. That's not a sustainable strategy. Neither is allowing preventable patient harm to continue because physicians have God complexes." Maya moved around her desk, closing the distance between them. "I survived 3 tours in combat zones and a director who tried to destroy me. If you think professional intimidation is going to work, you haven't been paying attention." For a moment, she thought he might actually escalate. His hands clenched, his face flushed, but he was smart enough to recognize that assaulting her, especially given the federal protection and ongoing investigations, would end his career. "We'll see how long you last," he said instead. "Nurses don't survive in leadership. The system eats people like you." "The system tried. I'm still here." He left without another word. Maya sat back down, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Day 1, hour 3, and she'd already made an enemy of the chief of surgery. Reeves was right. This job was going to be brutal. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus Webb." "Watched that encounter on security feed. Well handled. Masterson has a history of intimidating junior staff. You just served notice that won't work anymore." Maya texted back, "How many cameras are in my office?" "None. But the hallway outside has 3 angles. Welcome to the surveillance state. Get used to being watched." She spent the next 3 hours reviewing medication error reports from the past year. The patterns were disturbing. Surgical departments had the highest error rates, particularly in post-operative pain management. Patients were receiving incorrect dosages, wrong medications, or delayed treatments that extended suffering and recovery times. Most errors were attributed to nursing mistakes in the documentation. But when Maya cross-referenced with shift schedules and incident timing, a different pattern emerged. Errors clustered during periods when senior physicians ordered medications verbally rather than through the electronic system, bypassing the safety checks designed to catch mistakes. In other words, doctors were cutting corners to save time, and nurses were being blamed when the inevitable errors occurred. Maya was documenting this pattern when her door opened again. This time it was Deanna Park, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this." Deanna set a cup on Maya's desk. "Word is you've already pissed off Masterson. That might be a record. I wasn't trying to make enemies. You're doing it anyway, which is why half the nursing staff wants to buy you drinks, and the other half is terrified you're going to get fired and take everyone who supports you down with you." Deanna sat in the visitor chair. "What are you actually investigating first?" Maya gestured to her screen. "Medication errors in surgical recovery. The data shows systematic problems being blamed on individual nurses." "Finally," Deanna's relief was palpable. "We've been trying to get someone to look at that for years. Masterson runs his department like a fiefdom. Verbal orders, last-minute changes, then throws nurses under the bus when something goes wrong. 3 nurses have been terminated in the past 2 years for medication errors that originated with physician orders. Do you have documentation? I have incident reports, witness statements, and recordings of Masterson screaming at nurses for following his own orders. Deanna pulled out her phone. Most of us started documenting everything after Crane. We figured if the hospital wouldn't protect us, we'd protect ourselves. Maya felt something click into place. Can you get me copies, anonymized if necessary, but I need evidence that this is a pattern, not isolated incidents. I can have files to you by end of day, but Maya, you need to understand, going after Masterson is going to make the Crane fight look easy. He's been here 20 years, brings in millions in surgical revenue, has allies on the board and in the medical community. If you accuse him of systematic negligence, then I'd better have ironclad evidence. Maya met her eyes. Which is why I need everything you've got. Times, dates, witnesses, outcomes. Build me a case that can't be dismissed as vendetta or overreach. Deanna nodded slowly. You're really going to do this? Take on the entire medical establishment? I'm going to do my job. If that happens to threaten people who've been operating without oversight, that's their problem, not mine. After Deanna left, Maya continued her analysis, cross-referencing error reports with patient outcomes. 5 patients in the past year had experienced significant complications, extended hospital stays, additional surgeries, 1 death, directly traceable to medication errors in surgical recovery. All 5 incidents had resulted in nurses being disciplined or terminated. None had resulted in physician accountability. At 1:30, her phone rang. Webb again. Need to brief you before the department head meeting. Can you come to the security office? Maya found Webb in the same monitor-filled room where she'd first checked on Titan. The dog was there now, resting beside Webb's desk, but stood immediately when Maya entered. Hey, buddy. She knelt, letting Titan press his head against her chest in greeting. The ritual was becoming familiar, comforting. Webb waited until she was seated before speaking. The threat assessment has been updated. FBI identified the forum user who posted your information. He's connected to a contractor who lost a 7-figure deal when the procurement fraud came to light. They're watching him, but he's smart enough to operate through intermediaries. So the threat is real. Real enough that you shouldn't be alone off hospital property. Titan will accompany you during work hours, but we're recommending you relocate temporarily to secure housing. He pulled up an address. There's a DoD contracted residential facility used for witness protection and federal personnel. 30 minutes from here. Fully secured, monitored access. Maya's stomach nodded. You're asking me to go into hiding. I'm asking you to take reasonable precautions while FBI builds a case. If they can connect the contractor to conspiracy charges, the threat evaporates. But until then, I'm a target. She looked at Titan, who was watching her with unusual intensity. How long? Weeks, maybe months. Depends on the investigation. And if I refuse? If I stay in my own apartment and live my life? Webb's expression was carefully neutral. Then you're making my job significantly harder, and increasing the likelihood that something bad happens before we can prevent it. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to insist she wouldn't be driven from her home by threats from people angry that corruption got exposed. But she'd seen what happened when people underestimated determined enemies, had treated casualties who'd ignored threat assessments and paid with their lives. I'll move, she said, but I'm not hiding. I'm still doing my job, still investigating, still showing up to work every single day. Agreed. The facility is discreet, not isolating. You'll have privacy, autonomy, just with better security than a standard apartment. He handed her a key card. Address and access codes are on file. You can move in tonight. We'll assist with transportation and securing your current residence. This is insane. 2 weeks ago, I was unemployed. Now I need witness protection to investigate hospital safety violations. Welcome to the consequences of fighting institutional corruption. It gets messy. Webb's voice carried something that might have been respect. But you're still here, still fighting. That counts. The department head meeting was exactly as awful as anticipated. 23 senior staff crammed into a conference room, every one of them looking at Maya like she was a ticking bomb. Richard Masterson sat directly across from her, arms crossed, radiating hostility. Catherine Morse called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I know this has been a challenging few weeks. Today I want to introduce our new patient safety advocate, Maya Chen, and outline her role and authority. Maya stood, acutely aware of the scrutiny. My job is to identify and address systemic threats to patient safety. That includes infection control, medication errors, procedural violations, and cultural issues that prevent staff from reporting problems. I'll be conducting interviews, reviewing documentation, and observing operations across all departments. No one is exempt, no area is off limits. A physician Maya didn't recognize raised his hand. What qualifies a nurse to oversee physician practices? My military medical training, my direct observation of the consequences when safety gets sacrificed to ego or efficiency, and the authority granted by this board. Maya kept her voice even. I'm not here to second-guess medical judgment. I'm here to ensure protocols designed to protect patients are actually followed. Masterson leaned forward. And if your investigations disrupt critical operations, if you interfere with surgical schedules or emergency procedures, then those operations probably have safety problems that need addressing. Maya met his challenge directly. Patient safety doesn't take a back seat to convenience or revenue. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some supportive, most hostile. Morse let it run for 30 seconds before calling order. This isn't a debate. The position exists, Maya has full authority, and you will cooperate with her investigations. Anyone who doesn't can submit their resignation. Morse's voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. Are we clear? Grudging nods. Hostile silence. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes. Logistics, priorities, procedural changes. Maya took notes, cataloging who seemed receptive and who would actively obstruct. The divisions were clear. Nursing staff generally supportive, physicians ranging from wary to openly antagonistic, administrators calculating political angles. When it finally ended, staff filed out in clusters, conversations deliberately quiet. Maya was packing her materials when Masterson approached. You made a mistake targeting medication errors, he said quietly. That's my department, and I protect my people. Even when your people are harming patients? Especially then. Because I understand that medicine is complicated, that split-second decisions happen under impossible pressure, and that Monday morning quarterbacking from nurses with delusions of authority helps no one. Maya stood, meeting him eye to eye. 3 nurses were fired for errors that originated with your verbal orders. 5 patients suffered complications that were preventable. 1 died. If that's how you protect your people need better protection. Masterson's face went dangerously still. You're accusing me of killing a patient. I'm stating facts from incident reports. What you hear in those facts is your concern, not mine. For a moment she thought he might actually swing. His hands clenched, his jaw worked, and something violent flashed behind his eyes. But they were in a conference room with cameras, and enough people were still present that assault would have witnesses. This isn't over, he said instead. No, Maya agreed. It's just beginning. She left the conference room to find Titan waiting outside with Webb. The dog immediately positioned himself between her and the hallway, body alert. He sensed the tension, Webb observed. Masterson came out looking like he wanted to commit violence. He did. He restrained himself. Maya scratched Titan's ears. But I need to move fast on the medication error investigation. If I give him time to organize resistance, evidence will disappear. How fast? I want preliminary findings ready for the board by end of week. Full investigation complete within 2 weeks. She was already calculating. Interviews, document review, data analysis. Can you provide security footage of surgical recovery areas? I need to see the actual medication administration process. I can get you footage going back 6 months. But Maya, rushing an investigation this significant gives Masterson less time to cover tracks or intimidate witnesses. I learned that fighting Crane. Move fast, document everything. Don't give them time to mount organized opposition. Webb nodded slowly. All right, but understand, you're about to make very powerful people very angry. The threat assessment already has you in the high-risk category. This will escalate it. Good. Let them show their true colors while federal agents are watching. That evening, Maya moved into the secure facility with Titan as her escort. The apartment was sterile, but functional. One bedroom, small kitchen, living space with reinforced windows and monitored entry points. Webb helped her transport essentials from her old place, his presence professional and oddly comforting. "You'll be safe here," he said, demonstrating the security system. "Cameras, motion sensors, direct line to facility security. Titan will stay with you overnight when off duty. Think of him as a very alert, very protective roommate." Maya looked at the dog, who was already investigating the space with methodical thoroughness. "Does he actually sleep?" "Occasionally, but he's a light sleeper." Webb moved toward the door. "Try to rest. Tomorrow's going to be harder than today." After he left, Maya sat on the unfamiliar couch in the unfamiliar apartment and let the reality settle. She was living in witness protection because she'd done her job, was under federal guard because she'd refused to stay silent about corruption, had become a target for doing what should have been normal, protecting patients over politics. Titan patted over, resting his head on her knee. She stroked his scarred fur, drawing comfort from the solid warmth of him. "We're a pair, aren't we?" she said softly, both too stubborn to know when to quit. His tail thumped once against the floor. Maya spent the night reviewing files Deanna had sent, witness statements from nurses who'd been blamed for physician errors, incident reports with glaring inconsistencies, and recordings of Masterson verbally abusing staff for following his own orders. The pattern was undeniable. Systematic negligence protected by institutional hierarchy. She was building a timeline when her phone buzzed at 11 p.m. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, heavy breathing. Then a distorted voice, clearly filtered through software. "You should have taken Crane's settlement. You should have stayed quiet." Maya's blood went cold. Who is this? Someone who's tired of watching self-righteous bitches destroy good men over petty grudges. Crane made mistakes, but he didn't deserve prison. Masterson doesn't deserve whatever witch hunt you're planning. The voice was eerily calm. Walk away. Resign. Disappear. Or what happened to Crane will look gentle compared to what happens to you. The line went dead. Maya sat frozen, phone still at her ear, processing the threat. Someone had her new number, the one she'd only given to a handful of people. Someone was watching close enough to know about the Masterson investigation before it became public. Someone inside the hospital was feeding information to whoever wanted her gone. Titan was on his feet immediately, pressing against her leg, sensing her distress. Maya forced herself to breathe, to think tactically instead of emotionally. She called Webb. "I just got a death threat. On my new number. They mentioned both Crane and Masterson by name." Silence. "Then, stay where you are. I'm coming over. Don't answer the door for anyone else." He arrived within 20 minutes, 2 other security personnel with him. Maya played the voicemail the automated system had saved, the distorted voice, the specific threats, the intimate knowledge of her investigations. "This changes everything," Webb said grimly. "Someone inside Ridgewood is leaking information to hostile actors. We need to find them before they leak something that gets you killed." One of the other guards, a woman named Torres, was already on her phone, running a trace on the call. Probably bounced through multiple proxies, but we might get lucky. Maya's mind was racing. The only people who knew about the Masterson investigation were the department heads in today's meeting. That's 23 potential leaks. Not just them. Any staff they talked to, any notes they took, any emails they sent. Webb pulled up his tablet, accessing hospital security systems. "We need to lock down your investigation. Everything classified, access restricted, communications monitored." "That'll slow me down. Give Masterson more time to destroy evidence." "Better slow than dead." Torres looked up from her phone. "Call originated from a burner purchased in cash 3 weeks ago. Can't trace it to an individual, but the cell tower ping puts it within 2 miles of Ridgewood Memorial. So someone at or near the hospital, possibly staff." Webb was making notes rapidly. "I'm elevating this to FBI. This isn't just intimidation anymore. It's conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation." Maya felt the walls closing in. If they know about Masterson, they might warn him. He could be destroying records right now. "Then we move faster." Webb met her eyes. "I'm authorizing an emergency records seizure. Federal authority supersedes hospital administration. We confiscate everything related to surgical medication protocols tonight before anyone can sanitize files. Can you do that? The FBI can. And they owe me favors. He was already texting. But Maya, this escalation, once we go this route, there's no walking it back. The hospital will know there's a federal investigation beyond just Crane. Staff will panic. Whoever's leaking information will get desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people also get violent. Webb's voice was flat. The threat on that call wasn't bluster. Someone genuinely wants you gone. We need to treat this like an active threat to your life. Maya looked at Titan, who hadn't left her side since the call. At Torres, already coordinating with federal agents. At Webb, organizing a midnight raid on hospital records. 2 weeks ago, she'd been alone, facing down Vincent Crane with nothing but stolen files and stubborn refusal to surrender. Now she had federal protection, institutional authority, and people who believed her enough to risk their careers helping her. But she also had someone willing to kill her to protect the old system. The fight had just gone from professional to personal to lethal. And somewhere in Ridgewood Memorial, someone was watching, waiting, calculating how to make her disappear before she exposed too many secrets. Webb's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. When he hung up, his eyes met Maya's with grim intensity. FB. I just intercepted communication on the same forum that posted your information. New contract, $50,000 for permanent solution to the Chen problem. Posted 30 minutes ago. Maya's breath caught. Someone just put a price on my head. And someone accepted the contract. Webb stood. We're moving you again. Tonight. Different facility, higher security. Titan stays with you 24/7, no exceptions. Torres was already packing Maya's belongings. Webb coordinated with federal agents. And Maya sat on the couch, processing that she'd gone from terminated nurse to assassination target in less than 3 weeks. Because she'd refused to stay silent. Because she'd chosen patience over politics. Because she'd believed that truth mattered more than institutional protection. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from an encrypted number. The files you're looking for disappeared an hour ago. Masterson was warned. Whatever you think you're going to prove, you're already too late. Give up while you still can. Maya stared at the message, rage burning through her fear. Someone had warned Masterson. Someone had destroyed evidence. Someone was actively sabotaging her investigation while simultaneously threatening her life. But they'd made a mistake. They'd assumed she only had one source of evidence, assumed the files at the hospital were the only documentation. They didn't know about Deanna's recordings, about the nurses who'd been keeping their own records for years, about the federal security footage Webb could access independently of hospital systems. Maya stood, her decision crystallizing. We're not backing down. If anything, we accelerate. Hit them so hard and so fast they don't have time to cover tracks. Webb studied her. You understand what you're risking? I understood the first time I reported Crane. This just confirms I was right. The corruption goes deeper than one director, deeper than one department, and the only way to root it out is to burn it all down and rebuild from ash. Torres finished packing. Webb coordinated with the federal team that would transport her to the new facility. And Titan stayed pressed against Maya's side, a warm, solid reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. As they prepared to leave, Maya's phone rang one final time. She almost didn't answer, expecting another threat, but the number was Morse, the interim CEO. Maya, I just received a very disturbing call from Dr. Masterson's attorney. He's threatening to sue you personally for defamation, harassment, and interference with medical practice. They're claiming you've launched a vendetta against him based on hearsay and bias against physicians. He destroyed evidence of medication errors tonight. Someone warned him I was investigating. Silence. Then, can you prove that? Not yet, but I will. Maya, I'm going to be blunt. The board is getting nervous. Federal investigations, death threats, lawsuits, this is becoming untenable. Some members are suggesting we suspend your position until things calm down. Suspend me? Maya's voice went cold. So the people who want me dead get exactly what they wanted, me silenced and gone? I'm trying to protect you, and protect this hospital from more scandal. The hospital doesn't deserve protection if it's still protecting people like Masterson. I have evidence of systematic negligence. I have witnesses ready to testify. And I have a federal protective detail because someone thinks killing me is worth $50,000. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. You can suspend me. You can fire me. But I'm not stopping. The investigation continues whether I have institutional backing or not. Another long silence. Then Morse's voice, quieter. What do you need? Time. Access. And the board's commitment that they won't cave to legal threats or political pressure. This investigation ends when we've documented every instance of harm and held every responsible party accountable, not before. That's asking for a blank check. That's asking for you to keep the promises you made when you hired me. Complete autonomy, transparent reporting, no interference. Maya paused. Or was that just PR to manage the Crane scandal? It wasn't PR, but I didn't anticipate it would cost someone their life. Neither did I. But here we are. The question is whether you have the courage to see this through or whether you'll let threats and lawyers win. Morse was quiet for so long Maya thought she'd hung up. Then, you have 1 week. Prove Masterson's negligence or we pause the investigation pending external review. But Maya, be careful. I can't protect you if you're dead. The call ended. Webb was watching her with something between admiration and concern. You just gave yourself a 7-day deadline to take down the chief of surgery while dodging assassination attempts. I'm aware. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. Maya looked at him, at Torres, at Titan, who was waiting patiently for commands. 2 weeks ago, Vincent Crane was untouchable. He had power, protection, and absolute confidence no one would stop him. Now he's in federal custody facing decades in prison. Not because the system worked, but because people refused to accept that power trumped truth. Masterson has more allies than Crane ever did. Then we'd better make sure the evidence is so damning that allies become liabilities. She grabbed her bag. Let's go. We have work to do and not much time. They left the apartment in a 3-vehicle convoy, unmarked sedans, armed federal agents, protocols designed for witness protection of mafia informants, now being used to protect a nurse investigating hospital safety. The absurdity wasn't lost on Maya, but neither was the deadly seriousness. Someone had put a price on her life. Someone inside Ridgewood was feeding information to people willing to commit murder. And somewhere, Richard Masterson was probably celebrating, thinking he'd successfully buried evidence and intimidated her into submission. He was about to learn the same lesson Crane had learned too late. Maya Chen didn't intimidate. She documented. She gathered allies. She built cases that couldn't be dismissed. And she'd survived far worse enemies than arrogant physicians who thought their medical degrees made them untouchable. The new facility was a fortified townhouse in a gated community 30 minutes from the hospital. Heavy security, monitored access, the kind of place usually reserved for federal witnesses against organized crime. As Webb walked her through the security protocols, Maya's phone buzzed with incoming emails. Deanna had sent more files, encrypted, time-stamped, devastating. Nurses across multiple departments sharing stories of Masterson's negligence, abuse, and systematic blame-shifting. Every email was another nail in his coffin. Every witness was another person who'd found courage because Maya went first. The dam hadn't just cracked. It was breaking. And somewhere in the dark, someone was loading a weapon, accepting a contract, preparing to make sure the truth died with the woman who dared to speak it. Maya sat in her new secure apartment, Titan at her feet, and began organizing the evidence that would either save lives or cost her own. 7 days. 1 week to prove systematic negligence, expose corruption, and survive long enough to see justice done. She'd faced worse odds in Helmand Province. At least this time, the enemy wasn't hiding in shadows. They were walking hospital corridors in white coats, thinking themselves invincible. Time to prove them wrong. Maya worked through the night, Titan sprawled across the doorway like a living security system. The encrypted files from Deanna painted a picture worse than she'd imagined. Not just isolated errors, but a systematic pattern of Masterson ordering dangerous medication combinations, then falsifying records to shift blame when patients suffered consequences. At 3 a.m., she found the smoking gun buried in a nurse's personal documentation. A patient named Gerald Hoffman, 72, post-operative cardiac surgery. Masterson had verbally ordered fentanyl and midazolam in combination despite the patient's documented sensitivity to benzodiazepines. The nurse had questioned the order. Masterson had screamed at her in front of other staff, insisted she follow his instructions immediately. Gerald Hoffman had stopped breathing 40 minutes later. Emergency intervention saved his life, but the resulting oxygen deprivation caused permanent cognitive damage. The incident report blamed the nurse for failure to properly monitor vital signs. She'd been terminated 3 weeks later. Maya cross-referenced with hospital records Webb had secured before the midnight seizure. The original medication order in the electronic system showed exactly what the nurse claimed, a documented allergy warning that Masterson had overridden with his verbal command. Someone had altered the digital record after the incident, removing the override notation and backdating a false notation that the allergy wasn't listed at time of treatment. Digital forensics would prove the alteration. The nurse's contemporaneous notes would corroborate the timeline, and the outcome spoke for itself. A man who'd survived heart surgery but lost his independence because a surgeon's ego mattered more than patient safety. She was documenting the case when her phone rang. 5 a.m., Derek Townsend, the reporter. "Tell me you're not dead," he said without preamble. "Not yet. Why?" "Because someone leaked to us that there's an active contract on your life, and my editor wants confirmation before we run the story. Federal sources won't comment, hospital administration is stonewalling, and you're not answering your usual number." Maya processed this. Someone had leaked the assassination contract to the media. Whether to warn her or escalate pressure, she couldn't tell. "I'm alive and working. The investigation into Ridgewood continues." "Investigation into what specifically?" "We're hearing rumors about the chief of surgery, about systematic cover-ups of medical errors, but no one will go on record." "Give me 72 hours. I'll have something you can report that won't get rejected for lack of evidence." "Maya, if someone's trying to kill you, then they're doing it because I'm close to exposing something worth killing over, which means I don't stop. I finish." She paused. "But I need you to hold the assassination story. Running it now puts a spotlight that might push whoever hired the contractor to move faster." Derek was quiet. "That's asking me to sit on a major story. I'm asking you to let me stay alive long enough to give you a bigger one. 72 hours. Then you can run everything. The threats, the investigation, the whole corrupt system. 48 hours. That's all I can promise. After that, my editor runs with what we have." Maya hung up and immediately texted Webb. "Media knows about the contract. Someone's leaking investigation details. We need to find the source before they compromise everything." His response was instant. "Already on it. FBI's monitoring all hospital communications. We'll find them." At 6 a.m., Maya showered and dressed for another day of institutional warfare. Titan watched her with patient intensity, reading her stress in ways human observers would miss. When she knelt to scratch his ears, he pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of solidarity that made her throat tight. "We're going to finish this," she told him, "one way or another." His tail thumped once. Agreement or comfort, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. Webb arrived at 7 with breakfast and a grim update. FBI traced the assassination contract to a shell account connected to offshore holdings. They're digging deeper, but whoever funded this knows how to hide money. However, he pulled up his tablet. "We did catch something interesting on last night's hospital security footage." The video showed Richard Masterson's office at 11 p.m., long after normal hours. He was inside with 2 other people Maya didn't recognize. The conversation was silent on the recording, but body language told the story. Intense discussion, angry gestures, Masterson pointing at something on his computer screen. "We pulled phone records," Webb continued. "Masterson received a call at 10:43 from an encrypted number. Same encryption protocol as the number that threatened you. 20 minutes later, he's in his office with what we believe are legal counsel and a crisis management consultant. He was warned about the investigation, then immediately started building a defense. Which means whoever's feeding information to external threats is also feeding it to Masterson." Webb zoomed in on one of the figures in the video. That woman is Caroline Voss, no relation to Agent Voss. She's a reputation management specialist who works with high-profile clients facing scandal. Very expensive, very effective at making problems disappear. Maya studied the screen. "Can you identify the other person?" "Working on it, but the timing is damning. Your threat call at 11 p.m., Masterson's encrypted call at 10:43. Someone coordinated both contacts within the same 20-minute window. Someone who knew I was investigating Masterson and wanted to stop me before I found evidence. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. The department head meeting yesterday afternoon. 23 people knew about the medication error investigation. Any one of them could have made those calls. FBI's pulling phone records for everyone in that meeting, cross-referencing with the encrypted call origins, the forum posts, everything. If there's a connection, we'll find it. How long? 48 to 72 hours. The same timeline Derek had given her. Everything was converging toward a deadline she hadn't chosen but had to meet anyway. Maya arrived at Ridgewood at 8 a.m. with Titan at her side and Webb's team providing discreet coverage. Staff reactions ranged from supportive nods to hostile stares. Word had spread about the federal records seizure, about Masterson's midnight crisis meeting, about the escalating investigation. The hospital was choosing sides, and some people had already decided Maya was the enemy. Her office felt different. Still hers, but contaminated by the knowledge that someone in this building wanted her dead. She checked for tampering, found nothing obvious, but her military paranoia made her photograph everything before settling into work. At 8:30, her door opened. Catherine Morse, the interim CEO, entered without knocking. "We have a problem," Morse said, closing the door. "Masterson's legal team filed an emergency injunction this morning seeking to block your investigation. They're claiming harassment, bias, and abuse of authority. The hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Maya felt her stomach drop. "They're trying to shut me down before I can present evidence. They're trying to control the narrative. His lawyers are very good, and they're arguing that your investigation is retaliatory, that you're targeting Masterson because he challenged your authority in the department head meeting." Morse sat heavily. "The board is splitting. Half want to support you, half want to suspend everything pending the legal hearing. If we suspend now, evidence disappears. Witnesses get intimidated. The truth gets buried." "I know, which is why I'm not suspending you. But Maya, you need to understand, if you lose that hearing, if the judge sides with Masterson, your authority is gone. The position itself might be eliminated, and every investigation you've started becomes tainted fruit." "Then I won't lose." Maya pulled up her files. "I have documented evidence of systematic negligence resulting in patient harm. I have witness testimony from nurses he blamed and fired. I have digital forensics showing altered medical records. His lawyers can argue harassment all they want. The facts don't lie. Facts need to be presented properly. You need legal representation." "Hospital counsel?" "No. They're conflicted. Defending the institution means they can't fully support your investigation. You need independent counsel." Morse slid a business card across the desk. "This is Maria Santos. She specializes in medical whistleblower cases. Represented 3 major fraud cases against hospitals. Won all of them. She's expensive, but she's the best." "I can't afford expensive lawyers." "The board voted this morning to fund your legal defense. 8 to 5. You have institutional support, Maya. Barely, but it's there." Morse stood. "Santos is expecting your call. Get her up to speed today. The hearing is in 24 hours. After Morse left, Maya called Santos immediately. The lawyer answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Ms. Chen, I've been briefed on your situation. Send me everything you have, witness statements, medical records, documentation of threats and retaliation. I need it within 3 hours if we're going to build a defense for tomorrow's hearing." "Defense? Shouldn't we be on offense?" "In legal proceedings, the person seeking the injunction has burden of proof. But in practical terms, you're defending your right to investigate. We prove your investigation is legitimate, evidence-based, and necessary for patient safety. We demonstrate Masterson's pattern of negligence. We make the judge understand that blocking you means people die." Santos paused. "Can you do that in 3 hours?" "I can do it in 2. Maya spent the next 90 minutes compiling a prosecutorial brief that would have made her Marine Corps legal training officers proud. Every case documented with medical records, witness statements, and outcome data. Every pattern supported by statistical analysis. Every allegation backed by evidence that couldn't be dismissed as hearsay or bias. The Gerald Hoffman case was the centerpiece, a clear-cut example of Masterson overriding safety protocols, causing permanent harm, then falsifying records to avoid accountability. But she included 4 other cases with similar patterns, building an irrefutable narrative of systematic negligence. She sent the files to Santos at 10:30. The lawyer called back within 20 minutes. "This is prosecutable. Not just civil liability. I'm seeing potential criminal charges for falsifying medical records and reckless endangerment." Santos sounded energized. "Did you send copies to law enforcement?" "FBI has everything. They're investigating the broader corruption." "Good. We can reference the federal investigation in our response. Argue that blocking your work interferes with an active criminal inquiry." Papers shuffled in the background. "I'm drafting our opposition brief now. Meet me at my office at 6 p.m. We'll prepare for tomorrow's hearing." Maya hung up and allowed herself 30 seconds of hope. Then her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think lawyers will save you? You think a judge will side with a nurse over a decorated surgeon? You're delusional. Last chance. Resign today or face consequences tomorrow." She forwarded the message to Webb and the FBI. Deleted the threat. Refused to let fear dictate strategy. At noon, Deanna appeared at her door with a folder and 3 other nurses Maya recognized from the floors. "We heard about the injunction," Deanna said. "These are affidavits from every nurse Masterson terrorized or blamed for his mistakes over the past 5 years. Signed, notarized, ready for court. There are 17 of them." Maya took the folder, emotion catching in her throat. "You're putting your jobs on the line. You put your life on the line." One of the other nurses, a young woman named Kim, stepped forward. "We've been silent too long. Let our voices matter for once." The affidavits were devastating. Story after story of verbal abuse, impossible orders, blamed errors, and retaliation. 3 nurses described being physically intimidated, backed into corners, grabbed by arms, threatened with termination if they questioned orders. 2 reported Masterson to HR. Both were subsequently transferred to undesirable shifts until they quit. Maya scanned each statement, seeing the pattern that institutional investigations had somehow missed or ignored. Power protecting power. Status shielding abuse. The same dynamics that had protected Vincent Crane until someone refused to stay silent. "Thank you," Maya said quietly. "This changes everything." After they left, Maya forwarded the affidavits to Santos and Agent Voss, built them into her case documentation, started visualizing how tomorrow's hearing would unfold. Masterson would argue harassment and bias. His lawyers would paint Maya as a vindictive outsider attacking a respected physician. They'd minimize the patient harm, question her qualifications, suggest her investigations were retaliatory rather than evidence-based. But they couldn't dismiss 17 nurses. Couldn't explain away digital forensics showing altered records, couldn't wave away the documented pattern of harm stretching back years, unless the judge was already biased toward protecting physicians over holding them accountable, unless institutional power trumped evidence, unless the system protected its own regardless of truth. Maya had seen it happen before. In the military, in civilian life, in every hierarchy where challenging authority carried more risk than enabling abuse. But she'd also seen the opposite, had watched Vincent Crane's arrest, had felt the shift when enough people found courage simultaneously, had witnessed how truth could cascade once the dam broke. Tomorrow would determine which pattern prevailed. At 3 p.m., Webb entered her office with Torres and another agent Maya didn't recognize. "We have a development," Webb said, closing the door. FBI identified the person who's been leaking investigation details. Maya's heart rate spiked. "Who?" "Margaret Halstead, Vincent Crane's former assistant." The name hit like physical impact. Margaret, who'd warned Maya about Crane's volatile behavior, who'd witnessed the confrontation in his office, who'd been part of the group that stood up during the final showdown. That's impossible. She was one of the witnesses against Crane, which gave her credibility no one questioned. The FBI agent, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, pulled out her tablet. "We traced encrypted communications back to her home computer. She's been feeding information to a contact connected to the contractor who funded the assassination attempt. Not just about your investigation, about the entire federal inquiry into Ridgewood. Why? Crane's in custody. Crane's in... What does she gain? Leverage." The agent showed message logs between Margaret and an unknown contact. Her son works for one of the suppliers implicated in the procurement fraud. He's facing federal charges that could mean 15 years in prison. Someone offered her a deal: sabotage the investigations, feed them information to stay ahead of law enforcement, and her son gets immunity. Maya stared at the messages, seeing Margaret's desperation laid bare in digital text, seeing how quickly loyalty could flip when family was threatened, understanding that not everyone who'd stood with her had done so from courage. Some had been playing longer games. Does she know we've identified her? Not yet. We're letting the communication continue so we can trace the full network. The agent leaned forward. But Ms. Chen, you need to know Margaret provided your new phone number, your secure apartment address, and details about tomorrow's legal hearing. Whoever hired the contractor knows exactly where you'll be and when. The implications settled like ice in Maya's chest. They're planning to hit me at the courthouse, or on the way there, or at the parking garage, somewhere public enough that it looks random, professional enough that investigation gets complicated. Webb's voice was grim. We're coordinating with local PD and federal marshals. You'll have protection from the moment you leave this building until you're back in secure housing. What about Margaret? Are you arresting her? Tonight, once we've mapped the full conspiracy network, but her arrest will alert everyone connected to her that we're onto them. Things are going to move fast after that. Torres spoke for the first time. There's something else. Margaret's contact, the one offering her son immunity, we traced the account to a shell company owned by a board member, Dr. Raymond Harrison. The patrician board member who'd questioned Maya's authority, who'd pushed back against transparency, who'd voted against creating her position in the first place. Harrison's been protecting Masterson? And Crane before him, and probably a dozen other staff members whose misconduct threatened the hospital's reputation or revenue. Torres pulled up financial records. He's invested heavily in Ridgewood through various holdings. Scandal means decreased admissions, means lower profits, means his investments lose value. He's been systematically protecting abusers to protect his portfolio. Maya felt the scope of corruption expanding beyond anything she'd imagined. This wasn't just one director or one surgeon. It was institutional rot protected by people who profited from maintaining the status quo regardless of patient cost. Does the board know? Not yet. FBI's building a RICO case. Racketeering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. But it takes time. The agent stood. In the meantime, you're still a target. Harrison knows you're the catalyst for the entire investigation. Eliminating you simplifies his problem significantly. So, tomorrow's hearing is a trap. Margaret fed them my schedule. Harrison's probably coordinating with whoever took the contract. Which is why we're changing your security protocol. Webb pulled up a tactical plan on his tablet. You won't leave the secure facility tonight. Legal prep happens via video conference. Tomorrow you'll be transported in an armored vehicle with federal escort. Different route than expected. Titan stays with you at all times. Armed marshals in the courtroom. That's going to be obvious. Won't that tip them off we know about the threat? Let them know. Better they abort than succeed. Webb met her eyes. Maya, these people are serious. They've already demonstrated willingness to kill. Don't underestimate that. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle herself, that she'd survived worse threats in worse places. But combat experience didn't make her bulletproof, and arrogance got people killed. All right, we do it your way. But the hearing still happens. I'm not letting Masterson's injunction succeed because I'm afraid of assassins. Agreed, but we control the variables. Make it as hard as possible for anyone to take a shot. After they left, Maya sat in her office with Titan at her feet, processing the expanding conspiracy. Margaret's betrayal stung more than it should. She'd barely known the woman. But seeing how easily fear could flip someone from ally to saboteur was its own kind of wound. She worked until 6, then let Webb's team escort her back to the secure facility. Santos joined via video conference, walking Maya through tomorrow's hearing strategy with the precision of a general planning an assault. Masterson's lawyers will attack your credibility first. They'll emphasize your short tenure, your termination from your previous position, your lack of medical degree. They'll paint you as overreaching, biased, pursuing a personal vendetta. How do we counter? By making it about patients, not personalities. Every answer references specific harm. Every response includes medical documentation. You don't defend yourself, you defend the people Masterson hurt. Santos's eyes were fierce through the screen. And when they attack your qualifications, you remind the judge that you saved lives under fire while Masterson was ending them through negligence. They rehearsed for 3 hours. Questions, responses, hostile cross-examination. Santos was merciless, attacking every weak point, forcing Maya to sharpen her answers until they cut like surgical steel. At 9 p.m., Maya finally disconnected, exhausted but prepared. Titan had been patient throughout, occasionally standing to stretch before resuming his vigil by the door. She was making tea when her phone rang. Agent Voss, the state medical investigator. Chen, I wanted to give you advance warning. Our investigation into the infection rate fraud is complete. We're recommending the state suspend Ridgewood's accreditation pending comprehensive remediation. The board will receive formal notice tomorrow morning. Maya's tea forgotten. That's significant. That's catastrophic for the hospital. They'll lose federal funding, trauma certification, probably half their patient volume. It's the administrative equivalent of a death sentence. Voss paused, which means everyone with a financial stake in Ridgewood, including your friend Harrison, is about to get very motivated to make this problem disappear. Be careful tomorrow. After hanging up, Maya understood the timing. The hearing wasn't just about Masterson's injunction. It was about stopping her before the state's findings became public, before the full scope of institutional failure got exposed, before everyone connected to Ridgewood's corruption faced real consequences. Tomorrow wasn't a legal proceeding. It was a last stand. She tried to sleep, but nightmares invaded. Combat memories mixing with hospital corridors, enemies wearing surgical masks, Titan's growl echoing through fluorescent-lit hallways. She woke at 4 a.m., gave up on rest, and spent the remaining hours reviewing her testimony. Webb arrived at 6:30 with coffee and a tactical briefing. Margaret was arrested at midnight. She's cooperating, giving us names and communications in exchange for reduced charges. Harrison doesn't know yet. We're holding the arrest quiet until after your hearing. What did she tell you? That the contract on your life was Harrison's idea, that he's been coordinating with Masterson's legal team to destroy your credibility, that he has at least 3 other board members in his pocket who'll vote however he directs. Webb's voice was flat. She also confirmed there's a backup plan if the legal approach fails. Someone will be at the courthouse. She doesn't know who, but Harrison assured her the Chen problem would be resolved one way or another today. Maya's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Then let's make sure we're ready. The armored transport left at 7:45, 2 hours before the hearing. Webb drove with Torres riding shotgun. 2 federal vehicles flanked them, creating a mobile security perimeter. Titan sat beside Maya in the back, his body tense and alert. They took surface streets instead of highways, changed routes twice, made it impossible for anyone pre-positioning to predict their arrival. The courthouse was a brutalist structure downtown, all concrete and security checkpoints. Federal marshals were already in position, screening everyone entering the building. Santos met them in a secured conference room. She looked every inch the warrior lawyer, tailored suit, sharp eyes, leather portfolio stuffed with documentation. Ready? She asked Maya. As I'll ever be. Good. Remember, facts over emotion, documentation over argument. Let the evidence do the work. Santos checked her watch. Masterson will be here with his team. Don't engage, don't react, don't give them anything they can use. We speak in the courtroom, nowhere else. At 8:45, they entered the courtroom. It was smaller than Maya expected, wood paneling, flags, the kind of space designed for administrative law rather than criminal trials. But it was packed. Hospital staff filled the gallery. Reporters lined the back wall. And sitting in the front row, looking calm and confident, was Richard Masterson, flanked by 3 attorneys in expensive suits. He met Maya's eyes across the room, smiled slightly. The expression said he thought he'd already won. Maya took her seat beside Santos and waited. The judge entered at precisely 9 a.m., a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Judge Patricia Hendricks, according to the nameplate. We're here on an emergency motion for injunctive relief, Hendricks said without preamble. Dr. Richard Masterson seeks to block an ongoing investigation by Ridgewood Memorial Hospital's patient safety advocate. Mr. Sterling, you represent the petitioner. Present your case. Masterson's lead attorney stood, a man who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour and enjoyed every minute of it. Your Honor, my client is a decorated surgeon with 20 years of exemplary service. He's being subjected to a harassment campaign by Ms. Chen, a nurse with minimal experience who was terminated from her previous position for cause. Her investigation is not evidence-based. It's retaliation for my client questioning her authority in a professional meeting. Santos rose smoothly. Objection. Counsel is testifying rather than arguing law. Ms. Chen's employment history is irrelevant to whether her investigation has merit. Sustained, Mr. Sterling, focus on the legal basis for the injunction. Sterling adjusted course. Ms. Chen's investigation violates my client's due process rights. She's making accusations of negligence without proper medical review, targeting him specifically while ignoring similar issues in other departments, and creating a hostile work environment that interferes with patient care. Your Honor, Santos countered, Ms. Chen's investigation is authorized by the hospital board, supported by documented evidence, and addresses systematic patient safety concerns. Dr. Masterson seeks this injunction not because the investigation is improper, but because it's revealing misconduct he wishes to hide. Hendricks looked at Maya. Ms. Chen, you'll have opportunity to testify. But first, I want to understand the scope of your investigation. What specifically are you alleging? Maya stood, feeling dozens of eyes on her. Your Honor, I'm investigating a pattern of medication errors in surgical recovery that have resulted in patient harm. My findings show Dr. Masterson repeatedly ordered dangerous drug combinations, overrode safety protocols, and falsified medical records when patients suffered adverse outcomes. This isn't about one doctor. It's about systematic negligence that's been protected by institutional hierarchy. Do you have evidence supporting these allegations? Yes, Your Honor. Medical records, witness testimony from 17 nurses, digital forensics showing altered documentation, and patient outcome data demonstrating harm. Masterson's attorney jumped in. Alleged evidence gathered through unauthorized investigation. Ms. Chen has no medical training to evaluate the appropriateness of medication orders. She's interpreting complex medical decisions through a layperson's lens. I'm interpreting patient harm through a safety professional's lens, Maya said evenly. When a patient stops breathing because of a contraindicated drug combination, medical degree isn't required to recognize negligence. Hendricks raised a hand. I'm going to hear testimony. Ms. Chen, you're first. Mr. Sterling, you'll have opportunity to cross-examine. Maya took the stand, was sworn in, and looked directly at the judge as Santos began questioning. Ms. Chen, please describe your professional background. I served 3 tours as a combat medic with the Marine Corps, providing emergency medical care under fire. After leaving military service, I worked as a registered nurse. I'm currently employed as patient safety advocate at Ridgewood Memorial, with authority to investigate threats to patient welfare. In your investigation of Dr. Masterson, what did you find? Maya pulled out her documentation. I found 5 cases where Dr. Masterson ordered medication combinations contraindicated by patient allergies or drug interactions. In each case, when nurses questioned the orders, he verbally overrode their concerns. When patients experienced adverse outcomes, Dr. Masterson altered medical records to shift blame to nursing staff. Can you provide a specific example? Gerald Hoffman, age 72, cardiac surgery patient. Dr. Masterson verbally ordered fentanyl and midazolam despite documented benzodiazepine sensitivity. The patient suffered respiratory arrest, resulting in permanent cognitive damage. The nurse who administered the medication was terminated for failure to monitor vital signs. Digital forensics show Dr. Masterson altered the electronic record post-incident to remove the allergy warning he'd initially overridden. Santos introduced the medical records, the nurse's affidavit, the forensic analysis. Masterson's attorney objected repeatedly, hearsay, authentication, relevance, but Hendricks overruled each objection, clearly interested in the substance. Did you find other cases with similar patterns? 4 more with permanent harm, dozens more with adverse outcomes that didn't rise to catastrophic level, but still represented preventable suffering. Maya looked at Masterson, and a systematic pattern of blaming nurses for errors that originated with physician orders. Sterling's cross-examination was aggressive. Ms. Chen, you're not a physician, correct? correct? You've never practiced surgery, never ordered post-operative medications, never made the kind of split-second medical decisions Dr. Masterson makes daily? I've made split-second medical decisions in combat. Different context, same principle. Patient welfare comes before ego. That's not responsive. Answer yes or no. Are you qualified to second-guess a surgeon's medical judgment? I'm qualified to document when medical judgment results in patient harm and review whether protocols were followed. Followed according to whose standards? You've been in this position for 1 week. You're questioning decisions made by a surgeon with 20 years' experience. I'm questioning outcomes where patients died or suffered permanent damage because safety protocols were ignored. Maya kept her voice steady. Experience doesn't excuse negligence. Sterling continued for 20 minutes, trying to rattle her, paint her as biased and unqualified. But Santos had prepared her well. Every answer redirected to evidence, to patient harm, to documented patterns. When Sterling finally sat down, Hendricks looked at Masterson. Dr. Masterson, do you wish to testify? His lead attorney whispered urgently. Masterson shook his head. No, Your Honor. Hendricks made notes. I'm going to hear from one more witness. Bailiff, bring in Dr. Patricia Reeves. Maya hadn't known Reeves was testifying. Santos's slight smile suggested this was planned. Reeves took the stand, was sworn in, and faced the judge with calm authority. Dr. Reeves, you're chief of surgery at Ridgewood Memorial? Interim director, yes. I've also served as a cardiac surgeon there for 15 years. Are you familiar with Dr. Masterson's surgical protocols? Yes, I've worked alongside him for over a decade. In your professional opinion, do Ms. Chen's allegations have merit? Reeves took a breath. Yes, Your Honor. I've personally witnessed Dr. Masterson ordering contraindicated medications, overriding nursing concerns, and creating a culture where questioning his judgment results in retaliation. I've reported concerns to hospital administration multiple times. Nothing changed because Dr. Masterson brought in significant revenue and had powerful allies. Sterling shot to his feet. Objection! This witness has clear bias. She's been part of the investigation against my client. I became part of the investigation, Reeves said clearly, after watching Ms. Chen demonstrate the courage I lacked. She's right about the systematic negligence, and every physician in that hospital knows it, even if most won't admit it publicly. Hendricks leaned forward. Dr. Reeves, are you saying other physicians are aware of Dr. Masterson's practices? I'm saying the culture at Ridgewood has long prioritized physician autonomy over patient safety. Dr. Masterson is the most egregious example, but he's not alone. Ms. Chen's investigation threatens that culture, which is why there's been such fierce resistance. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Hendricks gavelled for quiet. Thank you, Dr. Reeves. You may step down. The judge looked at both legal teams. I'm ready to rule. Maya's heart hammered. This was it. Validation or destruction, authority confirmed or eliminated. Mr. Sterling, your client seeks to block an investigation that has produced substantial documented evidence of patient harm. While I understand Dr. Masterson disputes these findings, the appropriate venue for that dispute is through hospital administrative processes and potential medical board review, not through judicial interference with internal safety investigations. Sterling started to object. Hendricks cut him off. The motion for injunctive relief is denied. Ms. Chen's investigation will continue. However, she looked at Maya. I'm ordering that all findings be submitted to an independent medical review board within 30 days. Your investigation continues, but outside experts will evaluate your conclusions before any disciplinary action is taken against Dr. Masterson. Santos stood. Your Honor, the hospital has already implemented that protocol. An independent review is underway. Good. Then we're done here. Hendricks gathered her papers. Dr. Masterson, if Ms. Chen's allegations are false, the review board will clear you. If they're accurate, you'll face appropriate consequences. Either way, blocking the investigation serves no legitimate purpose. The gavel fell. Maya exhaled, feeling victory and relief in equal measure. The investigation would continue. Masterson's legal gambit had failed. Truth would have its day. But as she stood, preparing to leave, she caught movement in the gallery. A man she didn't recognize was rising from a back row seat, his hand moving inside his jacket. Titan saw it first. The dog lunged forward with a growl that cut through the courtroom murmur. Webb was already moving, positioning himself between Maya and the threat. "Gun!" someone screamed. The courtroom exploded into chaos, people diving for cover, bailiffs rushing forward, federal marshals drawing weapons. Maya found herself shoved behind Santos, who'd moved with surprising speed to create a human shield. The man's hand emerged from his jacket, not holding a gun, but a phone. He was filming, not threatening. But the damage was done. Panic had seized the room. And in the confusion, Maya saw Richard Masterson slip out a side door, his attorneys surrounding him like Secret Service. Webb's team hustled Maya out through judicial chambers, bypassing the public corridors entirely. They moved fast, Titan ranging ahead, clearing each hallway before allowing her to advance. "False alarm," Torres said into her radio. "Civilian with a phone, not a weapon, but we're not taking chances. Extraction proceeding as planned." They reached the secured garage where the armored vehicle waited. Maya was halfway to the door when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You won the hearing. You won't win the war. Check your office." Maya showed it to Webb. His face went pale. "Get her in the vehicle, now!" He was already calling Ridgewood Security. "I need eyes on Chen's office immediately. Possible threat." The response came through his radio within seconds. "Office is clear, but there's a package on her desk. No return address. Bomb squad is responding." They drove back to the secure facility in silence. Maya's victory felt hollow now, contaminated by the knowledge that winning legally hadn't stopped the people determined to silence her by any means necessary. At the facility, Webb's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression growing darker. When he hung up, he looked at Maya with something between respect and concern. The package wasn't a bomb. It was Gerald Hoffman's medical file, the complete, unaltered version showing Masterson's negligence. Someone inside Ridgewood sent it anonymously, probably hoping you'd have it for the hearing. Who? No idea. But Maya, there's something else. He pulled up his tablet, showing a news alert. Judge Hendricks issued a sealed order 30 minutes ago. Based on testimony in your hearing, she's referred the matter to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. Masterson is now officially under investigation for falsifying medical records and reckless endangerment. Maya stared at the screen. That's criminal charges, not just civil liability. That's justice finally catching up to him. Webb's phone rang again. He stepped away, talking quietly. When he returned, his expression had shifted to something grimmer. Raymond Harrison just resigned from the hospital board. FBI executed search warrants on his home and office 2 hours ago. They found evidence of the conspiracy, communications with Margaret, financial transfers to the shell account that funded your assassination contract. Everything. Is he under arrest? Not yet, but soon. Webb sat across from her. Maya, you need to understand what you've accomplished. In 3 weeks, you've taken down a corrupt director, exposed a chief of surgery's systematic negligence, triggered a federal investigation that's dismantling an entire corrupt network, and forced institutional reforms that will change how this hospital operates. That's not normal. That's extraordinary. Maya didn't feel extraordinary. Felt exhausted, threatened, barely holding together. I just wanted patients to be safe. Everything else just happened. Because you refused to accept that silence was mandatory. Because you kept pushing when everyone told you to stop. He paused. Margaret's testimony to FBI included something you should hear. She said Harrison told her Chen is dangerous because she doesn't understand that some battles can't be won. He was wrong. You proved some battles can be won. They just require someone willing to pay the price. That evening, Maya sat in the secure apartment with Titan beside her, watching news coverage of the day's developments. Derek Townsend's station led with the story, Surgeon under criminal investigation following explosive testimony. The report featured clips from outside the courthouse, interviews with legal experts, and references to the broader federal inquiry into Ridgewood Memorial. Her phone rang constantly, reporters requesting interviews, advocacy groups offering support, hospitals asking about her availability for consulting. The world wanted pieces of her now that she'd proven useful. At 8 p.m., Catherine Morse called. The board met in emergency session this afternoon. Masterson has been suspended without pay pending the criminal investigation and independent medical review. 3 other physicians who've shown similar patterns are under internal investigation, and the board voted to make your position permanent with expanded authority. I don't want expanded authority. I want to finish the job I started, which is why they're giving you the authority to do it properly. Maya, you've changed this institution in 3 weeks. Imagine what you could do with actual time and resources. After hanging up, Maya walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Masterson was probably with his lawyers, strategizing his defense. Raymond Harrison was likely destroying evidence or preparing to flee. And countless other people who'd benefited from Ridgewood's corrupt culture were scrambling to cover their tracks. But the truth was out now. The investigation was federal. The reforms were implemented. And the system that had protected abusers for decades was finally being dismantled. Maya's phone buzzed one final time. A text from Webb. Harrison just tried to board a private flight to Brazil. FBI arrested him at the airport, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and attempted murder for hire. He's not getting bail. She read the message twice, letting it sink in. The man who'd orchestrated her assassination attempt was in custody. The threat wasn't eliminated. There might be others, might be contingencies, but the primary architect of her destruction was neutralized. Her phone rang. Maria Santos. I wanted you to know Masterson's attorneys just contacted me. They're offering a settlement, full admission of negligence in the 5 cases you documented, resignation from Ridgewood, surrender of his medical license, and cooperation with criminal investigation in exchange for reduced charges. What are they offering? Essentially, he's trying to avoid prison, admit to civil liability, give up his career, but stay out of jail. Santos paused. It's your call. Your investigation started this. You have standing to weigh in on the criminal plea. Maya thought about Gerald Hoffman, living with permanent cognitive damage because a surgeon's ego mattered more than his safety. Thought about the nurses who'd been fired, blamed, destroyed for following orders. Thought about every patient who'd suffered because the system protected power over people. No deal, she said. He faces full accountability, criminal trial, public record, complete exposure. The families of the patients he harmed deserve to see justice, not a negotiated exit. That's what I thought you'd say. I'll inform his attorneys. After disconnecting, Maya sat with Titan, processing the day's cascade of victories and ongoing threats. She'd won the hearing. Masterson was suspended and facing criminal charges. Harrison was in custody. The corrupt network was collapsing. But someone had still sent her a death threat today. Someone had still left a package in her office. Someone was still out there, connected to the conspiracy, watching and waiting. Her phone buzzed. Webb. Need you to see something. Sending encrypted file now. The file arrived. Security footage from Ridgewood's administrative floor, time-stamped 3 hours ago. It showed someone entering her office during the courthouse hearing. The figure was careful, avoiding direct camera angles, but Maya recognized the body language. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the woman who'd testified on her behalf, who'd provided crucial evidence, who'd stood with her against Masterson. Reeves moved to Maya's desk, placed the package, Gerald Hoffman's medical file, and left quickly. Webb's text continued. She's been our inside source all along, the anonymous files that triggered the FBI investigation, the preserved evidence Crane tried to destroy, everything. But she's also been feeding sanitized information to Harrison to maintain cover. She's been playing both sides, protecting herself while helping you. Maya stared at the footage, seeing the complexity. Reeves had helped her, genuinely helped, but also hedged her bets by maintaining contact with the people trying to destroy her. Played the middle, trying to survive regardless of which side won. Another text, FB. I wants to know if you want to press charges. She technically obstructed their investigation by not coming forward earlier, but she also provided evidence that built the case. Your call. Maya thought about the courage it took to testify today, about Reeves's admission that she'd lacked Maya's bravery, about the fact that sometimes people took longer to find their courage, but still eventually found it. She texted back, no charges. She came through when it mattered. That's enough. The response was immediate. Copy that. She's being interviewed now. won't face criminal liability but will be required to provide full cooperation going forward. Maya set down her phone and looked at Titan. Everyone's got their own calculations, their own breaking points. We can't judge them all by the same standard. The dog's tail thumped agreement. At midnight, Maya was finally preparing for bed when her phone rang one last time. A number she didn't recognize but answered anyway.
Ms. Chen? A woman's voice, elderly, shaking. This is Diane Hoffman, Gerald's wife. I saw the news about Dr. Masterson. About your investigation. Maya's throat tightened. Mrs. Hoffman, I'm so sorry about what happened to your husband. I wanted to thank you. For 5 years, the hospital told me Gerald's injury was unavoidable, that the nurse made a mistake, that we should just accept it and move on. Her voice broke. But you proved it wasn't unavoidable, that someone was responsible, that my husband's suffering mattered. It mattered, all of it mattered. Will there be justice, real justice? Yes, Maya said with certainty. Dr. Masterson will face criminal charges. The hospital is implementing reforms, and your husband's case is documented evidence that will prevent this from happening to others. Thank you. Thank you for not staying silent when silence was safer. After hanging up, Maya finally let the tears come. For Gerald Hoffman.
For all the patients harmed by negligence, protected by power. For every nurse who'd been blamed and broken. For the cost of fighting when the system demanded surrender. But also tears of relief, of vindication, of knowing that the fight had mattered, the truth had prevailed, that justice, imperfect and delayed, was finally arriving. She climbed into bed, Titan settling on the floor beside her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles, but tonight she allowed herself to feel what she'd earned. Victory. Her phone buzzed one final time, a text from an encrypted number. The Hoffman file was just the beginning. Check your secure email. Password, justice_delayed. A friend who's been watching. Maya opened her laptop, accessed the encrypted account, entered the password. The inbox contained hundreds of files, medical records, financial documents, communications between board members, a complete archive of every corrupt decision, every covered-up harm, every instance of institutional malfeasance at Ridgewood Memorial for the past decade, and a single message: you proved one person can make a difference. Now prove an institution can change. The evidence is yours. Use it to finish what you started. Maya stared at the screen, understanding that her fight wasn't ending, it was expanding. That exposing Crane and Masterson was only the beginning of dismantling the system that had protected them. She looked at Titan, at the dog who'd recognized danger before she did, who'd stood beside her through every confrontation. Looks like we're not done yet, she said softly. His ears perked forward. Ready. Maya began downloading files, organizing evidence, building the case that would transform Ridgewood Memorial from a corrupt institution into something worth saving. Outside her window, dawn was still hours away, but morning was coming. And with it, the reckoning she'd promised from the beginning. Complete. Thorough. Unstoppable. The kind of justice that didn't negotiate or compromise. The kind that burned corruption to ash and built something better from the ruins. She opened the first file, seen financial fraud dating back years, and smiled grimly. Richard Masterson thought his resignation would end this. Raymond Harrison thought arrest was the worst consequence. They had no idea how wrong they were. Because Maya Chen had just received every piece of evidence needed to dismantle the entire corrupt network, every complicit physician, every enabling administrator, every board member who'd profited from patient harm. And she was just getting started. The archive contained 37 physicians with documented patterns of negligence or misconduct, 14 administrators who'd altered records or suppressed complaints, 6 board members beyond Harrison who'd profited from institutional corruption, and a financial network so complex it required forensic accountants to fully unravel, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, equipment purchases inflated to funnel money to shell companies, insurance fraud that had been running for years. Maya worked through the night, cataloging files, building timelines, connecting dots that revealed Ridgewood Memorial wasn't just protecting individual bad actors, but operating as a systematic enterprise of patient exploitation. Every documented case represented someone who'd trusted the hospital with their life or health and been betrayed for profit. At 4 a.m. And she sent everything to Agent Voss, to the FBI, and to Maria Santos with a simple message. This is what institutional corruption looks like when you actually dig. Use it. Santos called within 20 minutes, her voice sharp with caffeine and purpose. This is RICO prosecution territory. We're not just talking medical malpractice. This is organized fraud, conspiracy, potentially hundreds of millions in illegal revenue over a decade. Can you prove it? With this documentation, absolutely. But Maya, prosecuting this many people simultaneously, it's going to tear Ridgewood apart. The hospital might not survive the scandal. Maya thought about the patients harmed, the staff terrorized, the systematic abuse protected by the very institution meant to heal. Then maybe it shouldn't survive. Maybe something better needs to replace it. That's a nuclear option. That's accountability. The morning news cycle exploded with leaked details from the archive. Reporters Maya had quietly briefed were running simultaneous stories about the scope of corruption. Headlines screamed across every platform. Ridgewood Memorial, a decade of fraud. Federal investigation expands to dozens of hospital staff. How one nurse exposed systematic patient abuse. Maya watched the coverage from her secure apartment, Titan sprawled beside her, and felt the familiar weight of being suddenly visible. Her face appeared on screen, the professional photo from her hospital badge, looking composed and competent. But the stories weren't painting her as a troublemaker anymore. They were calling her a whistleblower, a hero, the catalyst for the largest medical corruption investigation in state history. Her phone rang constantly. She ignored most calls, but answered when Catherine Morse's number appeared. "Have you seen the news?" Morse sounded exhausted. "Hard to miss. The board is meeting an emergency session at noon. We're voting on whether to voluntarily surrender our accreditation and shut down operations pending federal review, or fight this publicly and risk criminal charges against the institution itself." Morse paused. "They want you there, want to hear directly from you about what you found." "Will Masterson be there?" "No, he's under house arrest pending trial. But several physicians named in your documentation will be. They still have board privileges until formally charged. It's going to be hostile." "I can handle hostile." "I know you can. That's why I'm calling. Maya, whatever happens in that meeting, whatever the board decides, I want you to know that hiring you was the right choice. You did what we asked and more. You didn't just investigate safety violations. You exposed rot we'd been ignoring for years. What will you do if the hospital closes? Start rebuilding. With people like you who actually care about the mission over the profit." Morse's voice carried grim determination. "See you at noon." Webb arrived at 10 to transport her, federal escort in place despite daylight and public visibility. The threat assessment hadn't changed. Whoever had funded the assassination contract might still have assets in play, might get desperate as prosecutions loomed. "You ready for this?" Webb asked as they drove toward Ridgewood. "Define ready." "Composed enough not to throw punches when physicians blame you for their own criminal behavior." Maya almost smiled. "I'll behave. Probably." The hospital looked different in morning light, less imposing, more vulnerable. News vans lined the street. Protesters had appeared overnight, some supporting the exposed staff, others demanding accountability. Security was heavy at every entrance, checking credentials, searching bags. The institution finally implementing precautions that should have existed all along. The boardroom was on the 7th floor, the same space where Maya had first been briefed on her impossible job. Now, it felt like a war room. Tense faces, hostile energy, the air thick with fear and anger. 12 board members sat around the long table. Catherine Morse at the head. 8 physicians named in the investigation occupied chairs along the walls, barred from voting but entitled to defend themselves. And at the far end, looking surprisingly small without his surgical team and operating theater authority, sat Richard Masterson's attorney, the surgeon himself forbidden from attending under house arrest terms. Maya took a seat beside Morse, Titan settling at her feet. The dog's presence drew stares, but no one challenged it. Everyone had seen the courthouse footage, knew what the K9 represented. Morse called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the allegations compiled by our patient safety advocate and determine the hospital's response." Mrs. Chen, please summarize your findings. Maya stood, pulling up her presentation on the boardroom screen. Over the past 3 weeks, I've documented systematic corruption affecting every level of Ridgewood Memorial. The archive I received last night, verified by FBI forensic analysis, shows this corruption dates back at least 10 years and involves 37 physicians, 14 administrators, and multiple board members. She clicked through slides showing financial flows, altered records, suppressed complaints. The pattern is consistent. Patient harm occurs, records get falsified to avoid liability, staff who report problems face retaliation, and money flows to individuals and entities with vested interest in maintaining the status quo. One of the physicians, Dr. Alan Wright, a cardiologist Maya recognized from the emergency department, stood abruptly. This is character assassination. You're taking complex medical decisions and interpreting them through a nurse's limited understanding. I'm documenting outcomes, Maya interrupted. Patients who died or suffered permanent harm after receiving substandard care. If you'd like to defend your medical judgment, you'll have opportunity in criminal court. This meeting is about institutional response. Wright's face flushed. You've destroyed this hospital, destroyed careers, all because you couldn't handle being terminated from your first position here. Maya met his glare calmly. I was terminated for discovering fraud, the same fraud that's now been independently verified by federal investigators. If exposing that destroyed careers, those careers deserve destruction. Morse intervened. Dr. Wright, sit down. Ms. Chen has the floor. Maya continued through the presentation, case studies, financial evidence, testimony from victims and witnesses. The room grew quieter as the scope became undeniable. Even hostile board members couldn't dismiss the sheer volume of documentation. When she finished, Morse opened the floor. Questions? A board member Maya didn't know, an older woman named Dr. Helen Park, raised her hand. What's your recommendation? As the person who investigated all this, what do you think we should do? Maya had been preparing for this question since 4 a.m. Close voluntarily. Surrender accreditation, cooperate fully with federal prosecution, then rebuild from scratch. New leadership, new protocols, new culture. Fire everyone implicated in the corruption, compensate victims, and commit publicly to transparency and accountability as core institutional values. That's suicide, Wright said. We'd lose everything. Patients would suffer from lack of access to care. Patients are already suffering from lack of competent, ethical care, Maya countered. Closing temporarily to fix fundamental problems is better than continuing to harm people while pretending everything's fine. Another physician spoke up, a surgeon named Dr. James Chen, no relation. What gives you the right to judge us? You've been here a month. We've dedicated decades to this institution. I've dedicated 3 weeks to actually investigating what you've spent decades covering up. Maya's voice was steel. And what gives me the right is that I'm the only person who cared more about patient safety than protecting my career. The room erupted in overlapping arguments. Morse let it run for 30 seconds before gaveling for silence. The board will vote. All in favor of voluntary closure and accreditation surrender, pending federal review and institutional restructuring. 5 hands rose immediately. Morse and 4 others Maya recognized as having supported her investigation from the beginning. Opposed? 7 hands. The vote failed. Morse's expression darkened. Then we fight. But understand, fighting means every one of you named in that investigation will be publicly defending your actions. The media will tear you apart. Your colleagues will be questioned. Your patients will sue. And when federal prosecutors come, and they will, you'll face criminal charges alone because the institution won't be able to protect you. One of the opposing voters, a banker named Thomas Reed, shifted uncomfortably. What if we take a middle path, cooperate with investigations, implement reforms, but stay open and operational? Then you're asking staff who've been complicit to investigate themselves, Maya said. Asking an institution that protected abusers for a decade to suddenly prioritize accountability. How's that different from what we've been doing? It preserves the hospital, preserves jobs, patient access, community resources. It preserves the same power structure that enabled the abuse. Maya looked around the table. You want a middle path? Fine. Independent external management team with authority to fire anyone at any level. Complete transparency. All investigations, all findings, all disciplinary actions made public. Victim compensation fund administered by outside trustees. And every single person implicated in the corruption, including those in this room, suspended without pay until cleared by independent review. The silence was deafening. Dr. Park spoke first. I'll support that. Second the motion. Morse looked around the table. All in favor? This time, 9 hands rose. Only 3 opposed. Motion carries. Morse made notes rapidly. I'll contact the state medical board about external management. Ms. Chen, you'll work with them to implement the review process. Wright stood again. This is insane. You're letting a nurse with a vendetta dictate hospital policy. I'm letting the person who exposed criminal conspiracy design the accountability process. Morse corrected. If you're innocent, Dr. Wright, the review will clear you. If you're not, you'll face appropriate consequences. That's how justice works. The meeting devolved into procedural discussions, timelines, legal representation, communication strategies. Maya half listened, watching the physicians who'd been so confident an hour ago now calculating their personal exposure, their legal liability, their chances of survival. This was what accountability looked like. Not satisfying, not clean, just necessary. The meeting adjourned at 2 p.m. Maya was gathering her materials when Patricia Reeves approached, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her earlier compromises. I testified because it was right, Reeves said quietly, but I stayed silent for years because it was easier. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand the difference. You came through when it mattered. That counts. Does it? How many patients were harmed during the years I kept Masterson's secrets to protect my position? Reeves's voice broke slightly. I'm resigning, effective immediately. This place needs leaders who didn't enable the corruption. I'm not that person. Maya wanted to argue, to say that imperfect allies were still allies, that courage at any point mattered. But Reeves was right. Real accountability required everyone complicit to step aside, make room for people who hadn't been compromised by the old system. What will you do? Testify in the criminal trials. Provide expert testimony about the medical negligence. Help prosecute the people I should have reported years ago. Reeves managed a weak smile. Penance, I suppose, for being too afraid to be brave when it would have cost me something. After she left, Maya stood in the empty boardroom, processing the cascade of consequences her investigation had triggered. Careers ended, criminal charges filed, an institution in crisis, lives disrupted across the board. She should feel triumphant, vindicated, powerful. Instead, she felt tired and sad and uncomfortably aware that justice was messier than the righteous certainty that drove her to pursue it. Webb appeared in the doorway. Media's requesting interviews. FBI wants a deposition. And Agent Voss says the state attorney general wants to personally thank you for the most comprehensive corruption case they've seen in decades. I just want to go home. To the secure facility or your actual apartment? Maya realized she didn't know anymore. The facility was safe but sterile. Her apartment was home but compromised by threats. She existed in a liminal space between the life she'd had and whatever came next. The facility, for now. They left through a service entrance, avoiding media and protesters. The drive back was quiet, Titan sensing Maya's mood and pressing against her leg in the back seat. At the facility, Maya collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations, interview requests, job offers from hospitals across the country. Everyone wanted the nurse who'd taken down institutional corruption. Everyone wanted to hire the whistleblower whose investigation had triggered federal prosecutions. But nobody asked what it cost. What it felt like to be vindicated and vilified simultaneously. What happened to the person who just wanted to do her job and ended up dismantling an entire system? Her phone rang. Diane Hoffman again. Ms. Chen, I saw the news. Everything you found, everyone you're holding accountable. Her voice was thick with emotion. I wanted you to know we're filing a civil lawsuit against Dr. Masterson, against the hospital, against everyone who knew and did nothing. Our lawyer says your investigation built the foundation for the case. I'm glad. You and Gerald deserve compensation. It's not about money. It's about making sure everyone knows what happened. That my husband's suffering meant something, changed something. She paused. You gave us that. Gave us the truth when everyone else wanted us to just accept it and move on. After hanging up, Maya pulled out her laptop and searched for news about Gerald Hoffman. Found a story from 5 years ago. Loving husband, retired teacher, active grandfather. Then the surgery. Then the preventable injury. Then 5 years of watching the man she'd married disappear into cognitive decline. And the hospital had called it unavoidable, had blamed a nurse, had moved on without accountability, until someone refused to accept that version. Maya was still processing when her door opened. She tensed. Nobody should have access to this secure space without clearance. But it was Webb, carrying takeout containers. You haven't eaten all day. Torres is monitoring the corridor. Titan needs food too. They ate in companionable silence. Chinese food that tasted like cardboard but filled the hollow feeling in Maya's chest. Titan devoured his portion with typical efficiency, then resumed his position by the door. The FBI arrested 4 more physicians today, Webb said between bites, based on your documentation. They're cooperating, providing testimony about the financial schemes. Whole thing's unraveling faster than anyone expected. Good. You don't sound happy about it. Maya set down her food. I'm relieved. I'm satisfied that truth is coming out. But happy? I don't know. This whole thing, it shouldn't have required federal investigations and criminal charges. It should have been handled internally the first time someone reported a problem. Should have, yes, but institutional corruption doesn't fix itself. It requires someone willing to be uncomfortable, to be hated, to sacrifice their own peace for other people's safety. Webb met her eyes. That's what you did. And it matters, even when it doesn't feel good. Does it get easier, the aftermath? No, but you get stronger at carrying it. He stood, collecting the empty containers. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to bring more media, more depositions, more people wanting pieces of you. Save your energy. After he left, Maya showered and prepared for bed, but sleep felt impossible. She pulled out her laptop again, reading news coverage, watching her story spread across platforms and networks. Some coverage was accurate, documenting the investigation, the evidence, the institutional failures. But some had already started the inevitable revisionism, framing her as crusader or vigilante, emphasizing conflict over facts, turning systematic corruption into a personal drama between Maya and various antagonists. She was becoming a symbol, a narrative, a cautionary tale or inspirational story, depending on the audience. But underneath all the coverage, she was still just Maya Chen, a woman who'd reported fraud, survived retaliation, and refused to accept that silence was mandatory. At midnight, her encrypted email pinged. New message from the anonymous source who'd sent the archive. You've done what I couldn't, exposed what I only documented, changed what I only observed. The archive was my insurance policy, evidence I collected over years, hoping someone brave enough would eventually use it. You were that person. Thank you for finishing what I was too afraid to start. Margaret Maya stared at the message. Not Margaret Halstead, Crane's assistant who'd betrayed her. Different Margaret. Someone else inside Ridgewood who'd been collecting evidence, building a case, waiting for the right moment or the right person. Someone who'd watched corruption flourish and documented it all, creating the weapon Maya had needed at exactly the right time. She'd had allies she didn't even know about. People working in shadows, protecting evidence, waiting for someone to be the visible catalyst they couldn't be themselves. Maya typed a response. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. Your documentation saved lives. That matters more than who gets credit. The reply came instantly. Credit isn't what I wanted. Justice is. You delivered it. Now rest. You've earned it. But rest didn't come. Maya lay in the unfamiliar bed in the secure apartment, listening to Titan's steady breathing, processing everything that had happened in 3 weeks that felt like 3 years. She'd been terminated, threatened, investigated by police, survived an assassination contract, exposed institutional corruption, triggered federal prosecutions, and fundamentally altered how one hospital would operate going forward. And somewhere in all that chaos, she'd become someone different, harder, clearer about what mattered and what didn't, less willing to compromise on truth, less interested in being liked or accepted. She'd become the person this fight required, Wasn't sure yet if that was something to celebrate or mourn. Morning arrived with another media firestorm. Richard Masterson's attorney had released a statement claiming his client was a scapegoat, that the real corruption was administrative rather than medical, that physicians were being unfairly targeted by an overzealous investigation led by someone with questionable qualifications. Maria Santos called at 7 a.m., her voice sharp with anger. Have you seen Masterson's PR offensive? Just watching it now. It's deflection, classic blame shifting to muddy the waters before trial. But Maya, we need to respond. The narrative is starting to slip toward hospital administration threw doctors under the bus. We need to remind people about the actual victims, the patients he harmed. How? Press conference. You, me, representatives from the Hoffman family, and other victims. We present the medical evidence, the patient outcomes, the human cost of Masterson's negligence. Make it about the harm, not the personalities. Maya's stomach clenched. I don't do press conferences. You do now. This afternoon, 3 p.m., County Courthouse steps. FBI is supporting it. They want public pressure on the remaining targets to cooperate rather than fight. Attorney General's office will be there. It's the full institutional weight of accountability, and you're the face of it. I'm not a spokesperson. You're the person who started this, who believed victims when institutions didn't. That gives you standing no one else has. Santos's voice softened slightly. I know it's uncomfortable. But Maya, if we let Masterson control the narrative now, everything you've accomplished gets diminished. Trust me on this. At noon, Maya met with Santos and the FBI to prepare. They ran through likely questions, hostile angles, how to redirect from personal attacks to documented evidence. Agent Voss attended via video, providing updates on the state's investigation. Accreditation suspension was proceeding. External management team had been selected. Victim compensation fund was being established. The system's responding, Voss said. Not perfectly, not fast enough, but responding. Your investigation created momentum that forced action. At 2:30, Webb drove Maya to the courthouse with full security detail. The steps were crowded, media, spectators, hospital staff, both supportive and hostile. A podium had been set up with microphones from a dozen news stations. Diane Hoffman was there, looking frail but determined. 3 other families stood with her, relatives of patients who'd died or been permanently harmed at Ridgewood. Their presence was silent testimony to the cost of institutional negligence. Santos approached the microphone at precisely 3 p.m. Thank you for coming. We're here to discuss the ongoing investigation into Ridgewood Memorial Hospital and to ensure the focus remains where it belongs, on patient safety and accountability. She introduced Maya, stepping back from the podium. Maya faced the cameras, the crowd, the weight of expectations, and found her voice. 3 weeks ago, I was a nurse who discovered fraud and reported it. Today, I'm standing here because that simple act of reporting triggered a cascade of accountability. But this isn't about me. It's about patients like Gerald Hoffman who trusted a hospital with their lives and were betrayed. She gestured to the families. These people deserve to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones. They deserve accountability from the systems that failed them, and they deserve a healthcare institution that prioritizes their safety over profit or reputation. A reporter called out, Ms. Chen, doctor, Masterson's attorney says you're unqualified to judge medical decisions. How do you respond? I'm qualified to document when medical decisions result in preventable patient harm. I'm qualified to recognize when safety protocols are ignored, and I'm qualified to demand accountability when physicians prioritize ego over patient welfare. Maya kept her voice level. Medical degrees don't exempt anyone from basic ethical standards or legal requirements. Do you think you've destroyed Ridgewood Memorial? I think Ridgewood Memorial destroyed itself by protecting corruption for years. I just documented what was already there. What happens next for you? Maya paused, realizing she hadn't actually considered this question. What did happen next? Return to Ridgewood if it survived, accept one of the offers from other hospitals, something completely different? I continue the work, she said finally. Wherever I can make a difference in patient safety and institutional accountability. That's what matters. The press conference lasted 40 minutes. Diane Hoffman spoke about Gerald's decline, her voice breaking but never faltering. Other families shared their stories. The FBI representative outlined the criminal investigation. The Attorney General's office confirmed prosecutions were proceeding. By the time it ended, the narrative had shifted. Social media was flooded with support for the victims. News coverage emphasized the documented harm rather than personality conflicts. And Masterson's deflection attempt had backfired spectacularly. Webb drove Maya back to the facility in silence, letting her decompress. At the entrance, he turned to face her. "You did good today. Reminded everyone what this fight is actually about. Doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it's what was needed." He paused. "FBI says the threat level has decreased. Harrison's in custody, most of the conspiracy network is cooperating, and public attention makes you harder to target quietly. You could probably return to your regular apartment if you want." Maya looked at the secure facility, her temporary refuge already feeling like a cage. "I want my life back, or whatever version of it still exists." "Then let's make that happen." The next morning, Webb's team helped Maya move back to her apartment. It felt strange, familiar but foreign, like returning to a place you'd left years ago rather than weeks. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, but she'd changed too fundamentally to fit the same space. She spent the day unpacking, reclaiming her territory, trying to establish routines that felt normal. Titan stayed with her. Webb had arranged for the dog to remain as her protective companion indefinitely, a federal resource reassigned based on demonstrated bond and tactical value. "He's yours now," Webb had said during the handover. "Or you're his. Hard to tell which." At 6 p.m., Catherine Morse called. "The external management team wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're reviewing your investigation and want your input on reforms." "I thought I was suspended like everyone else implicated." "You were never implicated. You're the investigator, not the investigated. The board voted this morning to reinstate you with expanded authority and significant raise, if you want it." Maya sat with that offer, feeling its weight. Return to Ridgewood in triumph, wielding institutional power, shaping the rebuilt culture. It was vindication made manifest, the ultimate reversal from terminated employee to empowered reformer. But it was also returning to the site of trauma, working within systems she'd just proven were fundamentally broken, trusting that this time would be different. "Can I think about it?" "Take a week. The management team needs time to assess before making personnel decisions anyway." Morse paused. "Maya, I understand if you don't want to come back. What you've been through, it's enough to make anyone walk away. But I hope you don't. We need people who can't be corrupted or intimidated. That's rarer than you'd think." That evening, Maya sat on her couch with Titan sprawled across her feet and opened her laptop. Job offers filled her inbox, hospitals competing for the whistleblower who'd exposed institutional corruption, consulting firms wanting her expertise, advocacy groups requesting her involvement, media outlets seeking book deals or documentary participation. The world wanted to capitalize on her story, package her experience into products and narratives and profitable ventures. But underneath all the noise, she found an email from a small community hospital 2 states away. The subject line was simple: "Help us get it right from the beginning." The message was from their newly appointed patient safety director. "Ms. Chen, we're a 200-bed facility serving a rural community. We've never had major scandals, but we've also never had robust safety protocols. I'm trying to build a system that prevents the kind of institutional corruption you exposed at Ridgewood. Would you consider consulting with us? Teaching us what warning signs to watch for, what structures to implement, how to create a culture where reporting problems is rewarded rather than punished? We can't pay what big hospitals offer, but we're genuinely committed to getting this right. Dr. Sarah Mitchell." Maya read the email 3 times, feeling something shift in her chest. This wasn't about capitalizing on her story. It was about preventing other stories like hers from needing to happen. She typed a response. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm interested. Let's talk about what preventing institutional corruption looks like when you build the right culture from the start." Over the next week, Maya met with the external management team at Ridgewood, providing detailed recommendations on reforms. She consulted with the FBI on prosecution strategy. She gave depositions for multiple civil lawsuits, and she started conversations with small hospitals about building better systems. The Masterson trial was scheduled for 6 months out, giving prosecutors time to build an airtight case. Harrison faced separate federal charges with trial dates still being determined. 3 other physicians had taken plea deals, admitting to fraud and accepting permanent medical license revocations in exchange for reduced sentences. The system was grinding forward. Slowly, imperfectly, but forward. On Thursday afternoon, Maya received a call from an unknown number. She almost sent it to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Ms. Chen?" A young woman's voice, nervous. "My name is Ana Torres. I'm a nurse at Westside Medical Center. I think my supervisor is falsifying patient records to hide medication errors. I've documented everything, but I'm terrified of reporting it. Everyone says whistleblowers get destroyed, that institutions always protect their own." Maya's heart rate spiked. Here it was, the ripple effect. Someone else finding courage because they'd watched her fight and survive. "Ana, tell me what you've documented." They talked for an hour. Maya asked questions, provided guidance, connected her with Maria Santos and Agent Voss. By the end, Ana had a plan: how to report safely, what protections existed, what to expect from institutional retaliation. "Thank you," Ana said, her voice stronger now, "for showing it's possible to fight and win. I didn't think people like us could actually make a difference." "People like us are the only ones who can," Maya said. "We see what others miss or ignore. That's not a weakness. That's exactly what the system needs." After hanging up, Maya sat with the knowledge that her fight had multiplied, that other people were finding courage, reporting problems, refusing to accept that silence was mandatory. The change was spreading beyond Ridgewood, beyond her individual case, becoming something larger. Friday morning, Maya made her decision about Ridgewood's offer. She called Morse directly. "I'm not coming back. Not permanently." Morse was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask why?" "Because Ridgewood needs leaders who weren't traumatized by its corruption. People who can rebuild without carrying the weight of what it was. I can consult, provide guidance, testify in trials. But I can't be the daily face of reform in a place that tried to destroy me." Maya paused. "I'm more valuable helping other institutions prevent corruption than fixing this one after the fact." "I understand. And Maya, thank you for everything you sacrificed to force this accountability. Thank you for eventually supporting it. That mattered more than you know." She spent the weekend drafting a consulting framework: how to build patient safety cultures, what warning signs indicated institutional corruption, how to create reporting systems that actually protected whistleblowers. It would be her contribution, distilled from hard experience into practical guidance. On Monday, Derek Townsend called with unexpected news. Masterson's lead attorney just withdrew from the case. Turns out the FBI found evidence he'd been coaching witnesses to lie, destroying evidence, all sorts of obstruction. He's facing his own criminal charges now. Masterson has to start over with new counsel, and no prestigious firm wants to touch him. So the trial gets delayed? Probably. But Maya, his whole defense strategy just collapsed. Without his expensive legal team protecting him, he's going to face the full weight of the evidence you compiled. Prosecutors are saying he'll likely take a plea rather than risk trial. That evening, Maria Santos confirmed it. Masterson's new attorney reached out. They want to negotiate a plea. We're talking significant prison time, 5 to 8 years, full restitution to victims, permanent medical license revocation. It's not the 20 years he deserves, but it's accountability. What do the families want? Justice and closure. Most are willing to accept a plea if it means avoiding a traumatic trial. Diane Hoffman asked me to consult you. She trusts your judgment. Maya thought about Gerald Hoffman, about preventable harm and stolen futures, about whether 5 years in prison balanced against permanent cognitive damage. The math didn't work. Justice never quite balanced the scales. Accept the plea, she said, but make sure the admission of guilt is public and complete. No ambiguity, no room for him to later claim he was pressured. Full acknowledgement of every patient harmed. Done. 2 weeks later, Richard Masterson stood in criminal court and admitted to 23 counts of reckless endangerment, fraud, and falsifying medical records. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in state prison, permanent revocation of his medical license, and restitution exceeding $2 million. Maya watched from the gallery, Diane Hoffman beside her. When the sentence was read, Diane reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," the older woman whispered, "for making this real, for forcing them to admit what they did." Masterson was led away in handcuffs, no longer the confident surgeon who'd terrorized nurses and intimidated staff, just a man facing consequences he'd always assumed his status would prevent. The system had worked. Imperfectly, belatedly, but worked. Outside the courthouse, Maya declined media requests for statements. This wasn't her victory to claim. It belonged to the patients and families who'd suffered, who'd trusted the system and been betrayed, who deserved acknowledgement more than she deserved celebration. She was walking to her car when a voice called her name. Patricia Reeves, looking older somehow, worn by the weight of testimony and admission. "I wanted you to know. I've accepted a position with the State Medical Board, investigating complaints about physician misconduct, using what I learned from failing to act sooner." Reeves managed a small smile. "Penance, like I said, but also purpose. That's good work. Important work. Inspired by yours." Reeves extended her hand. "Thank you for being brave when I wasn't, for showing that one person refusing to accept corruption can actually change systems." They shook hands, two women who'd navigated the same corrupt institution from different positions, finding different paths to accountability. Over the following months, Maya built her consulting practice, working with hospitals across the country to prevent the kind of institutional rot that had flourished at Ridgewood. She testified in ongoing trials. She mentored other whistleblowers, finding courage to report problems. She became a voice for systematic reform rather than just individual accountability. Ridgewood Memorial reopened under new leadership 6 months after Masterson's sentencing. The reforms were comprehensive: independent safety oversight, protected reporting systems, regular external audits, victim compensation protocols. Catherine Morse stayed on as CEO, determined to rebuild the institution's reputation through demonstrated commitment to change. "We're naming the new Patient Safety Center after you," Morse told Maya during a consultation visit. "The Maya Chen Center for Medical Accountability, if you'll allow it." Maya had hesitated, uncomfortable with monuments while the work remained unfinished, but eventually agreed, understanding that symbols mattered, that visible commitment to change helped embed new culture. The dedication ceremony drew media attention, speeches about transformation and courage. Maya attended but didn't speak, letting the families of victims share their stories instead. Their voices mattered more than hers. They'd lived the consequences of institutional failure and deserved to witness the promised changes. A year after Vincent Crane's arrest, Maya stood in her apartment packing for another consulting trip. Titan watched from the couch, older now, but still alert, still protective. The dog had become more than security. He was companionship, reminder of the bond forged in crisis that transcended the moment. Her phone rang. Webb, checking in as he did periodically. "Saw the news about the Chen Center dedication, fitting tribute. Feels strange having my name on a building. Get used to it. You changed healthcare accountability in this state. That kind of impact leaves marks." He paused. "How are you really doing? Not the public version, the actual human person version." Maya considered the question honestly. "I'm okay. Some days are hard, nightmares, hypervigilance, all the aftermath of sustained threat and trauma. But I'm working, making a difference, helping prevent what happened to me from happening to others. That feels like purpose. That's all any of us can ask for. Purpose built from pain." After hanging up, Maya looked around her apartment, the space she'd reclaimed made into home again. Awards and acknowledgments lined one wall now, recognition from advocacy groups and professional organizations. But what mattered more were the emails from nurses who'd reported problems after watching her story, from hospitals implementing reforms because her case proved the cost of ignoring corruption. She'd wanted to disappear after leaving the military, to atone quietly through healing work. Instead, she'd become visible, recognizable, a symbol of what one person could accomplish by refusing to accept institutional protection of harm. It wasn't the life she'd chosen, but it was the life her choices had created, messy, complicated, meaningful in ways she was still learning to appreciate. Her laptop pinged with a new email. Another small hospital requesting consultation. Another opportunity to prevent rather than expose, to build right systems from the beginning rather than dismantle corrupt ones after catastrophic failure. Maya responded immediately, scheduling the call, diving into the work. Because this was what remained after accountability, the long, unglamorous labor of prevention. Of teaching institutions to value truth over reputation, safety over profit, people over politics. This was the real victory, earned not in courtrooms or headlines, but in quiet reforms spreading across countless healthcare facilities. 1 year became 2. The consulting practice grew. The reform spread. Vincent Crane finished his first year in federal prison. Raymond Harrison was convicted on conspiracy charges and sentenced to 15 years. Ridgewood Memorial's patient safety metrics improved dramatically, becoming a model for institutional reform. And Maya Chen, former combat medic, former terminated nurse, former whistleblower, became someone different. Not a victim or a crusader, but a professional advocate whose expertise was preventing the conditions that created the fight she'd survived. She taught workshops on recognizing institutional corruption, consulted with hospital boards on building accountable culture, mentored whistleblowers navigating the treacherous path between reporting problems and surviving retaliation, connected victims with legal resources and advocacy support. The work was exhausting and sometimes discouraging, but it mattered. Every hospital that implemented stronger safety protocols was a battle won. Every nurse who reported concerns without facing retaliation was validation. Every patient protected from preventable harm was purpose fulfilled. 3 years after her termination from Ridgewood, Maya was invited to testify before a congressional committee investigating healthcare institutional corruption. She sat in the hearing room, surrounded by legislators and lobbyists and other expert witnesses, and told her story one more time. But this time, she wasn't fighting for her own credibility or survival. She was advocating for systematic reforms, federal protections for healthcare whistleblowers, mandatory external safety audits, civil and criminal liability for institutional cover-ups. We've treated healthcare corruption as isolated incidents, she told the committee, individual bad actors in otherwise functional systems. But my experience at Ridgewood proved that's false. Corruption is systematic, protected by institutional hierarchies that prioritize reputation over accountability. Until we change those structures, patients will continue to suffer. The reforms passed 6 months later. Not perfect, not comprehensive, but meaningful progress toward the accountability she'd fought for. Standing on the Capitol steps after the vote, surrounded by other advocates and survivors, Maya felt something shift. Not closure, the work was never finished, but resolution. The sense that her fight had created ripples extending far beyond her individual case, changing systems rather than just exposing bad actors. Her phone buzzed. Diane Hoffman, texting a photo of Gerald smiling in his care facility, holding a newspaper with the headline about the new federal protections. He doesn't remember the fight, but I do. Thank you for making sure it meant something. Maya saved the photo, adding it to the collection of reminders about why the work mattered when it felt overwhelming. That evening, back in her apartment, she sat with Titan and reviewed the week's consulting requests. Hospitals wanting guidance, nurses seeking support, families demanding accountability. Each message represented someone finding courage to speak up, to demand better, to refuse acceptance of harm as inevitable. The dam she'd cracked at Ridgewood had broken across the entire system. Change was spreading, slowly, imperfectly, but spreading. And Maya Chen, who'd once just wanted to quietly atone for the lives she couldn't save in combat, had found purpose in protecting lives from institutional corruption in civilian healthcare. It wasn't the peace she'd sought. It was something better. Impact that extended beyond her own healing into systematic change that would protect countless people she'd never meet. She'd been called a troublemaker, and she'd proven them right, but on her terms. With evidence. With allies who'd found courage because she went first. With accountability that transformed institutional culture. Maya opened her laptop, pulling up the next consulting project. A small clinic in Montana worried about a new administrator who seemed more concerned with profit than patient care. Early warning signs, opportunity for prevention rather than exposure after harm. Exactly the work that mattered most. Titan's head rested on her knee, steady presence and silent support. Outside the window, Baxter Springs glowed in evening light, a city where her story had started with termination and threat. evolved through investigation and survival, and settled into purpose and impact. She wasn't the person who'd walked into Ridgewood Memorial a year ago. That woman had been quieter, more hesitant, still believing that keeping her head down was the path to safety. This woman knew better, knew that safety came from accountability, from refusing to accept that silence was mandatory, from building systems that protected truth-tellers rather than powerful abusers. She'd paid for that knowledge with trauma and threat and constant vigilance, but she'd also gained something invaluable: the certainty that one person refusing to be silent could cascade into systematic change. That was worth the cost. Maya began typing her response to Montana, sharing expertise earned through fire and threat and institutional warfare, teaching another small facility how to recognize and prevent the corruption she'd exposed, spreading the lessons she'd learned in blood and terror and hard-won victory. Some battles can't be won by individuals alone, but they can be started by one person brave enough to speak. And once started, once that first crack appears in the facade of institutional invincibility, others find courage to join the fight, until the entire corrupt structure collapses under the weight of accumulated truth. That was justice. Not perfect, not clean, not without cost, but real, and worth every price she'd paid to achieve it. Maya worked late into the night, Titan sleeping peacefully beside her, protecting the woman who'd once saved his life and who now spent her days saving others from the institutional corruption that had nearly destroyed her. The fight wasn't over, would never truly be over. But she was no longer fighting alone, and that made all the difference.